Give you the floor.
Thank you. I recommend approval of the minutes pertaining to collective bargaining, NEA, ESP negotiation update remain sealed until such time as an agreement has been reached.
So moved.
Thank you, Linda. There was a motion by Mr. Luzon, a second by Linda McAllister to recommend that the minutes pertaining to collective bargaining, NEA, ESP negotiation remain sealed until such time as agreement has been reached. Those in favor? Any opposed, abstaining, or recusals? That vote is unanimous. Thank you very much. Ms. Picard?
I recommend that minutes pertaining to pending litigation and legal strategy remain sealed.
I think she froze.
Oh, did I freeze?
I recommend that minutes pertaining to pending, can I do this? Oh, there she is. You froze, Gina.
That was weird. Okay.
That was weird.
I recommend that minutes pertaining to pending litigation and legal strategy remain sealed.
Sealed.
So moved.
Oh, thank you, Ryan. Mr. Luzon made the motion and Mr. Callahan seconded to recommend that minutes pertaining to pending litigation legal strategy remain sealed at this time. Those in favor? We are voting on these, right? Yes. Ryan, you froze. Okay. So that looks, we're starting to, I guess maybe there's a lot of people on, Gina. We're starting to freeze a little.
It shouldn't matter.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'm sorry.
We
Can I
had
have
more
that?
than this.
Can I have the hand again for a vote on that? Thank you. Mr. Day, yes. Mr. Stahl's just coming back. So Donna, that was Linda Lau, Mr. Luzon, Ms. McAllister, Ms. Chambers, Ms. Giusti, Mr. Callahan, Ms. Macruso, and I believe William Day all voted in favor. I don't see Mr. Stahl. Oh, Mr. Liguori. Thank you, Gary. Oh, there's Mr. Stahl. Okay, I think people are freezing. Okay, Ms. Picard, number 3, please.
I recommend that minutes relating to the privacy of students and their records, approval of home instruction requests remain sealed.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Luzon. And those second it? May I have a second? Mr. Callahan, thank you. There was a recommendation that minutes relating to the privacy of students or records, approval, home instruction remain sealed. Ms. Luzon made the motion and Mr. Callahan seconded. Those in favor? Okay, we have Mr. Day. Yep, there's his hands up. Okay, Mr. Stahl. Okay, that's unanimous this time, Donna. Thank you. I could see everyone's hands. Number 4, disclosure executive session minutes. Catherine?
You. We had 5 votes in the executive session. The first was executive session minutes of February 9th, pre-deprivation hearings, non-renewal of teacher contracts. Approved Callahan, Chambers, Day, Giusti, Liguori, Luzon, Macaruso, McAllister, and Stahl. Liguori, Luzon, Lyall, Macaruso, McAllister, and Stahl. And then the final vote was to return back to open session. All in favor: Callahan, Chambers, Day, Giusti, Liguori, Luzon, Lyall, Macaruso, McAllister, and Stahl. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Giusti. Thank you very much. We move on to recognition. Ms. Picard, I'll give you the floor.
First, I'd like to recognize, and I hope everyone joins me in congratulating the following: grade 10 student, Virginia Keister, winner of the Poetry Out Loud competition. Postseason recognition of ice hockey, Caden Wilson, second team, all division, D2 South defense. All-star game selection, Hobie Baker Award nominee as well. We also have Jason Desroges, first team, all division, D2 South, who played forward, and also all-star game selection. and Sean Quirk from Narragansett, second team All Division D2 South forward.
Congratulations to all. Thank you. I just want to take a few minutes at this time during the recognition portion to publicly thank Cynthia Drummond for all her support and her news articles with the Wesley Sun when she reports out on the news of the Cheruhou School community too. And the few times I've had the opportunity to speak with her, she's always been supportive and fair in her reporting. And we all wish her the best in her new endeavors. And I believe there's some school committee colleagues that would like to share some thoughts and well wishes. Ms. Chambers, you have the floor.
Yeah, Cynthia, thank you for your, as Linda said, reporting accurate, truthful, fair. It's always been consistent. It has not been easy along the way, and I wish you well in your next endeavor. And I'm really glad you live in Charlestown, because maybe one of these days our paths will cross. Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you.
Does anyone else from the school committee like to have a well wishes or comments? No? Okay, well, oh, Mr. Day, please take the floor.
Yes, I'll just kind of echo what Donna said. Cynthia and I go back quite a ways with the school committee, and as Donna said, she's always been right on top of things and doesn't pull any punches on what goes on here at the school committee. And I'm sure I'm going to run into you somewhere in Charleston, Cynthia. So enjoy yourself, wear a mask, be safe, and make sure you get a shot.
Thank you, Mr. Day. Okay, thank you, everyone, and congratulations again, Cynthia. Job well done. Moving on to public forum. This is an opportunity for the public. We can open up for any comments or questions that are not on the agenda this evening. Now, if you need to raise your hand, if you do the reactions button at the bottom of your screen, there's a raise hand icon, which is great because that puts you to the front of the line and I can actually see you and call on you. If you don't have that or you're on your phone, is it *7? I believe it is *7 that you, Gina, is that what it is? *7?
*6.
*6. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. *6. And then that will give you that will help me find you if you're on the phone. Also, too, this evening, if you do have a chance to speak, either in public forum or at another time, if you would please introduce yourself, that would be really helpful to the committee. And let us know maybe what town you're from, too. That would be great. Thanks very much. So at this point in time, I don't think I see any hands up for a public forum. Oh, wait, I see one. It's a telephone number 401-539-2160. Could you please introduce yourself? Can we unmute? Can they unmute, Eric? I can't. Okay, you're ready to speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, this is Georgia Ewer.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
was at the last meeting when we had a public forum, and I wasn't allowed to speak, but I was told that if I came to this meeting, I would be allowed to speak. So I don't have an agenda. I did call the school and I got so that I could get onto the meeting through my telephone, but I
Okay.
don't know what your agenda is, so I don't know when I should speak, but I would like to speak.
Okay,
when
if you
that's
tell-
possible,
Miss
if you would
Yuri,
let me know.
If you tell me what you would like to speak on, I will tell you if it's on the agenda or not, and that would probably be the best way to do it.
Well, I hope it's on the agenda because I was asked to come tonight so I could speak.
Okay, so what is it that you'd like to speak to?
It's about the consolidation of the 3 elementary schools into one school.
Well,
And I'd like to speak about the money involved. I wanted to speak about that money involved the last time. It was the budget, but I wasn't allowed to speak.
Okay, we have it. It is on the agenda. It is letter E. So at that point in time, when that comes up, you'll be able to speak on it.
You'll have to let me know that because I can't see anything.
Okay.
I'm on the
What I do is
telephone, so
I'll go
somebody
through
will
it,
have
like we're going, okay, Miss Yuri, we're going into business and it goes by A, B, C, and D, and I do announce it. So when I say letter E, that's when we're ready. There'll be a presentation, there'll be some information shared, and then you'll have a chance to make a comment.
And should I raise my hand or should I unmute myself or what should
Sure,
I
raise
do?
your hand and I will acknowledge you. That would be great. Thank you very much. Okay.
All right, now what do I do? Do you mute me or do I mute myself? How do I do?
I muted you. Okay, so we are on, I guess, I want to give people a chance and see if there's anybody else that want to speak for public forum. I don't see anyone else, so we can move on to business. And the first is letter A, and it's the Anti-Racism Task Force Policy Subcommittee update. And before I give Lisa Macaruso the floor to introduce tonight's presentation, I would like to thank the Anti-Racism Task Force members for all the work done to date on this time, up to this time, on a very timely and important subject. Additionally, to clarify and possibly dispel some misinformation, any recommendations that arise from the Anti-Racism Task Force will be brought to the school committee for public discussion. Ultimately, it will be the school committee who determines and approves, with input from school leadership, any possible new school-based initiatives. And I just wanted to put that out there because I think there's maybe some things going on around that. I just wanted to dispel some misinformation. So I appreciate that time. Ms. Macaruso, I give you the floor. Can we unmute her?
There we go. Thank you, Chair. First, a little bit of housekeeping. Dan Fitzgerald will need access to the screen. He will be presenting the slides for the Anti-Racism Task Force this evening. And then Joe Reddish and Donis and Dartula will also need to have the ability to unmute to present their pieces and introduce themselves to the public. And so with that, I'm going to speak very briefly because their hard work is going to speak for itself. But I just wanted to take the opportunity to welcome the community and remind everyone that the Anti-Racism Task Force was approved to examine policies, practices, and curriculum for the Cheruhou Regional School District only. It is not a committee that is looking at broader issues in our community or in our world at this time. And just as the chair said, they've worked hard and done a tremendous amount of research to bring recommendations to the school committee, which is the ultimate authority over these decisions. And they fully expect that some items will be sent back to the task force for further review and more research and to answer questions from our committee, and perhaps others will be picked up and moved forward, but that is the work and that is the expectation. And I know that they are very happy to be able to speak to all of you tonight. And so with that, there's really nothing more for me to say because they're going to take it from there. So Mr. Reddish, I believe you are beginning, but Mr. Fitzgerald is going to be controlling the screen.
I believe you should all be seeing that now. I'll hand it over to you, Joe.
There we go. Well, good evening to the school board committee and also to community members who have joined the call this evening. And I welcome also my Anti-Racism Task Force colleagues tonight. First, I'll just tell you a little bit about myself, which each of the members of the committee will share a little bit about each of themselves. My background for 28 years. My educational background is my parents are retired educators, my dad being a guidance chairman at high school, my mom being an elementary school principal for 37 years. I was part of the school improvement team way back when Barry was just putting in the plans as assistant superintendent about where the school district is today. So I'm very honored to be a part of this committee, as well as I'm a past council president for 8 out of my 10 years on council. So I have a real passion for the Cheruhou community and the school district as it is. Tonight, we're going to be talking about where we're at today. Again, to reiterate, these are going to be really recommendations. And what we're asking the school committee to do is just hear our direction. And our goal this evening is really to look at kind of what your thoughts are on our direction to make sure we're going down the right path and that we represent what the request and the needs are of the school committee were when this anti-racism task force. I will start with a quote to kind of get us all in the same mindset. It is not our differences that divide us. It is our inability to recognize and accept and celebrate those differences, by Audre Lorde. And we use that quote to start off this evening, is to really talk about the fact of what we're trying to do is to bring together our whole community, our whole school district. And I say whole community because our children are part of our community, but really to make sure to help provide recommendations that can help to ensure that we have a good platform for us to continue our growth as a school district. Our charge from you, the school committee, was approved the formation of the anti-racism task force, and really was to examine policies, practices, and curriculum through the lens of diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. And tonight we're only focusing on one of those silos of information this evening, and so on. But I'd like to share just an overview of what we have done so far. In our initial formation, the first thing we did was make a recommendation to you, the school committee, to change the name from Anti-Racist Task Force to Anti-Racism Task Force. And that was really to better capture the intending outcomes and work of this body and to create an environment of inclusion and collaboration so that we can move forward in a positive manner. All of our meetings are public meetings. And this is by state law, but it's also by our own desire and the school committee's desire to ensure that everything is open to the public. All the meetings are recorded for those individuals who cannot make the meetings, but we invite the public to join us at any time in the conversations that we have. And I say conversations purposely because really it's a conversation. And by conversations, it allows us to move forward and to get to the best recommendations for the school committee. We have broken ourselves up into 3 work groups, and we felt this was important to do this so that we could really focus in on each area. And those 3 areas are policy, practices, curriculum. And really that allowed us to kind of move a little bit quicker within those groups to provide some really good recommendations. Tonight, we're going to share an outline of where we're headed. And again, this is a journey. It's not just a trip, it's a journey, because this is a journey to get to the right next steps for recommendations to you, the school committee, that hopefully you will make those implementations that you see best for our students at Cheruhou School District. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reddish. Yat She'e Ndonis Spears Initiate. Hi, everyone. My name is Ndonis Spears, and I am a part of the Cheruhou community because my children are, I have 2 currently attending Hope Valley Elementary School, and I have 2 that will be entering Hope Valley Elementary School within the next 4 years. So really heavily invested in the culture at Cheruhou and to do better by all of our students at the elementary on up. I am originally from Arizona. I am Diné Ojibwe Choctaw and Chickasaw, and I am married to a Narragansett man, and we have our 4 children who are enrolled in Narragansett, raising them here in South County. And I've lived here in Hope Valley we bought our house about 8 years ago and lived here in Rhode Island for almost 12 years now. So I'm just part of kind of the broader Indigenous community here in South County, and really honored to be serving on this task force with all of my colleagues here this evening. So just to kind of review and reiterate what Mr. Reddish already introduced to you, we have 3 subcommittees that we meet in. so that we can kind of organize and focus our efforts around something that is, you know, anti-racism is a huge, almost nebulous subject matter to approach. So these are kind of the ways that we find to organize our thoughts around policy, examining current practices, policies, assessing gaps, and recommending new policies as needed. So that's what we'll be focusing on this evening. In the next two school committee meetings, you will be hearing from the practices subcommittee and the curriculum subcommittee. So just to give you some insight, over the past few months, the task force has been getting organized. We've been learning, we've been requesting data. We want to gain a really comprehensive understanding of what has already been done in the school district, because there have been efforts and conversations about this in the past, and we want to recognize that. And understand the interrelated functions of policy, practice, and curriculum. With that being said, we'll go ahead and introduce our 3 tiers. Again, we kind of wanted to make this something that was tangible and in terms of setting goals and having a conversation this evening. We want to present these as Mr. Reddish said. These are not set in stone. These are high level kind of overview of the conversations we've been having thus far, and conversations with the community, with students, with educators in Cheruhou, and with community stakeholders. So our first tier, and just for reference, we want to have feedback and discussion, and we will be opening it up for that at the end of our allotted time here. So we'll go through the tiers, and then we'll have some discussion afterwards. So our first tier is to we recommend the creation of a diversity statement and discrimination policy. So this would be something that would be aligned with the district mission and vision and articulates clearly Cheruhou's commitment to this ongoing work. There may have been elements of this already developed in other places. As I said before, this work and these conversations have been happening and predate us by quite some time. But we want to provide some kind of cohesive statement and language that is uniform and accepted and also is visible to our Cheruhou community. So that is our first kind of tier in recommendation. And those are kind of like easily our first and most accessible tier, and they get a bit more time and effort intensive as we move through the tiers. So I will go ahead and turn it over to my colleague and friend Dartula.
Thank you, Adonis. And good evening, school committee members and members of our wonderful community. It is really wonderful to get to this point to be able to share with you all tonight. My name is Dartula Matthews. I'm an awesome resident of this wonderful Cheruhou community and proud parent of this awesome community. I have 3 children, and my children in various stages have attended the schools, the elementary school, the middle school. And when I say I'm a proud parent, I am. My son is a senior. I can't even believe it. In other capacities, I've worked in university, college, and high school spaces where I've brought in the community and done some collaborative work with students, families, the university, and even awesome stakeholders in support for those institutions. And I've also done some diversity, inclusion, and equity and justice training and work in those spaces as well. So I am comfortable in this work. My husband has lived here. He was an MVP in the high school. My in-laws lived here for a long time. In fact, my mother-in-law can remember going to the elementary school, and then even their parents have a connection to this community. So it was without a doubt, a place that we're going to stay and raise our children and will continue. With that said, I'm happy to share about our next tier. And this next tier, which we are hoping to bring some data-based contributions in recommendation for the school committee in relation to examining and updating the Cheruhou school handbooks through an anti-racism lens to ensure clear, proactive, and responsive efforts around diversity, equity, and inclusion. So, reviewing our school's current policies and assessing potential possible gaps is what we will do. And that, as we said, it's data-based. We're going to look at these handbooks, which people have poured so much time and energy in assembling and maintaining. So we're going to look at that data and that information and, do a reassessment and emphasize some clarity around any opportunities for continued success and improvement if and where a recommendation for support is needed. That is what we are happy to bring. And with that said, I'm happy to pass it on back to my colleague, Dan, to share tier 3 of our work.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dertula. And thank you to the community and to the school committee for having us here this evening. My name is Dan Fitzgerald. I live in Hope Valley. I graduated from the Cheruhou Regional School District back in 2013. Which is hard to believe. It feels like that went by really fast. I really cherish this community for a lot of reasons. I am the founder and currently serve as the executive director of the Cheruhou Youth Task Force, which is our main purpose as an organization is to educate, empower, and engage youth and adults in our community around a variety of topics, primarily in the substance use and mental health space. So we get to work really closely with the district in a lot of different ways there. I, primarily in my work, I work kind of at the intersection of policy and public health. So really excited to be kind of channeling the work I'm able to do with students in our district and that kind of thought through policy and public health. So with that said, again, to finish off this slide you see here, talking about tier 3, and when we talk about the different tiers, I think as Adonis and Dertula mentioned, really thinking through that it doesn't mean that, when you all consider these recommendations and decide where you want to go with these recommendations, it doesn't mean that number 3 has to wait until 1 and 2 are done, but really thinking through that to really truly do these in an intentional comprehensive way that it may take a lot more effort and thought there. So with that said, our recommendation that we'll be flushing out a little bit more will be around the recommendation to write and recommend a policy ensuring ongoing professional development related to diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice for all faculty, staff, and administration. As a working group, we did want to acknowledge there is lots of comprehensive professional development done by the school district in a wide variety of topics. We know that there has been professional development on this very topic. So we did want to acknowledge that, similar to what Adonis and Dertula mentioned, and in a lot of these spaces, work has already started, which is really incredible. But our thoughts here are really about creating kind of a comprehensive, ongoing professional development model for our faculty and staff related to these topics. And the thoughts there are really around if we have a new staff person coming in, what's the protocol there for kind of getting up to speed on where Cheruhou stands on these topics here, and just I know the big professional development that staff went through before the school year even started really focused on education through the lens of a diverse learner and what that means in a wide array of topics, even outside of some of the work that we're doing here as a task force. So really excited to continue to flush that out. And as Donis mentioned, we're really excited to hear some feedback in a few moments. But of course, before we do that, we just wanted you to know kind of where our thoughts are and our next steps. We're really excited to be here tonight providing you with a progress report about some of our thought trajectories, so you kind of have an idea about, from a policy perspective, where we're going. As Joe and others mentioned, we have broken out into these 3 work groups based upon the charge that you all assigned when appointing and creating the anti-racism task force. So the policy committee, we just provided this brief progress report. You'll then be hearing from our practices and then from the curriculum working groups at future meetings. And we thought it would be an intentional way to split this up so that we could really get your feedback in kind of a variety of ways. I'll hand it back over to Joe to finish off our presentation.
Sure. Thank you, Dan. Again, our goal has been shared throughout our conversation this evening, is really to give you a little bit to start with so you understand where we're headed. And we would like you to kind of give us some feedback so that we can, work forward to make sure we're going down the right path. In addition, we will continue to gather information, and as it was shared, data is a strong point in this whole process and conversation, and we'll use that information to provide the creation for formal recommendations within each of our work groups. Again, as Dan shared, we've done it in 3 parts so that there can be real clarity of each area going forward. So in the next couple of meetings, you'll see part 2 and part 3 of the silos there. Our recommendations, our goal is to provide you with a list of really thought out or thoughtful recommendations to the school committee. And when I say thoughtful, we're really putting a lot of effort and time into making sure that we understand. We've invited different groups in, but we also want the public to join our meetings and share their thoughts and observations and visions. And we even invite the school committee members to pop in and join us in the conversation. And if you can't join us in the conversations at that time, please pull up the recordings and kind of review what we've talked about and send over your thoughts so that we know that you're listening and you have input, and that we can hear you and your thoughts and concerns that are up front, because this is a process for our children, our community children. And it's important that everybody be part of that formula. I quite often describe communities as diamonds. And Cheruhou, and I've been part of Cheruhou community for almost 29 years, coming straight in to Cheruhou community from California. And the one thing is, I recognize that Cheruhou is made up of many, many facets, similar to what a diamond is. And we all know, especially the women, and the men know if they don't get the right quality diamond, but unless all those facets on that diamond are shining through, the value of that diamond loses very quickly. And our goal in this process of interaction and analysis is to really make sure the diamond we know as the Cheruhou School District shines brightest amongst the state, as it has for many, many years.
So I think we will go ahead and close out our time and thank everyone for your time and attention. And I think Dan, Dartula, and Mr. Reddish, we are going to open up for comment at this point, and we just say thank you for your time, your thoughtful kind of processing with us to help inform our next steps.
Thank you very much. That was a great presentation, very informative. Ms. Chambers, you have the floor. You had your hand up first. Donna Chambers.
Yeah, I am so glad I have this opportunity to congratulate you all. I have been supportive of this task force from the very beginning when Lisa suggested it. I have also quietly attended most of the meetings, not all of them. I think I missed one. I didn't feel comfortable really I wanted to see you guys work, and I am extremely impressed at how you have quickly organized yourself. I think Cheruhou is very lucky to have the talents of the individuals on this task force to be contributing to this. One thing I will strongly suggest that I felt was needed from the beginning, but you're getting around to it, is that at this last meeting, you were talking about developing a website so you could put terminology. And I do believe, because I'm hearing that there is some misinformation out there about what this task force is all about. I think it's extremely important from the beginning to establish terminology so we are all taught, what do we mean by anti-racism? What do we mean by bias? So, and you've all come to that conclusion. So as soon as you can put that glossary out there in the website, the better off we will all be. I did a little looking around, and you may already be familiar with it. Georgetown University has an anti-racism toolkit that has a wonderful glossary. It's short, it's quick, and it really gives a good explanation of the terminology. Continue the work. You're on a great path. Thank you very much for being here to help our school district in this endeavor. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Chambers. Ms. Juicy, and then Ms. Hopkins. Catherine Juicy, you have the floor.
Thank you. I appreciate what Donna said. That was going to be my recommendation as well, that it's really critical that people understand what you're talking about. If you get too jargony, for lack of a better word, it really, people just stop paying attention. So I appreciate the addition of a glossary. I think that's a great idea. So I appreciate the update. I appreciate the work. I think you've been very transparent. I think meetings have been posted. I've seen other people who are in firm disagreement with you who have gone, and I'm sure would have had the opportunity to voice their concerns at that time. So I think I appreciate that you understand that this is big, heavy work, and that there are going to be people who may not understand the full scope of it. So the more that you can put a fine point on that kind of work, I think the better for you. The purpose of tonight's meeting, I know, was an update. So your next step, are you going to be working on some of this policy and bringing it to us at a later date for us to look at? Or are you looking for guidance from us as to what we want you to work on first? Thank you.
Am I able to?
Would somebody like to answer that, Dan?
Sure. Yeah. And other members of the group, feel free to jump in. So our thoughts, we wanted to make sure we could let you know kind of where our thought trajectories were, so that, you know, if we were completely heading down a way where the school committee is like, this is really not what, when we created this wasn't the direction, this, you know, helpful to know. But yeah, our next steps, if you have feedback tonight, it would be great to bring that back. But our next step is to really take those three really broad tiers that we talked about and presented on, and then really write out what a formal recommendation could look like. And again, I think as Lisa mentioned, and as Joan and Adonis mentioned as well, you know, we as a task force can't make those changes. That's for all of you to decide in a public open forum. But we hope to be able to put as much thought in, you know, intentionally writing out what a policy could look like. For example, make that as a recommendation to you all, so then you can work on deciding, you know, what the next steps would be. But others, feel free to jump in there.
And just to follow up on what Dan has indicated, we felt it extremely important that as a task force that's been asked to be put in place by yourselves, is that we be proactive in providing you information. And I know from just my management background, there's nothing worse than asking somebody to go do something and we don't hear anything back. And so in our mind is we want to be as open as possible. We want to be as upfront as possible. But we also know to get down a road of success, we also need to provide a map so that we all know where we're headed, and ensure that we're all on the same path. And as you said, Ms. Juicy, that having the terms and the commonalities, those were the things that were on our mind, to make sure that we're all singing from the same hymn book. Not that we're all going to be singing the hymn same level, but we want to be making sure that we're communicating, but we want individuals to share their thoughts. Without everybody sharing their thoughts and their input during this process, what comes out of the end won't be perfect. We wanted to try and be as best a fit for our community school system as possible. And so talking in the group from everybody and hearing that feedback is really, really, and I stress it again, really, really important that everybody participate now in that process.
Thank you. Ms. Hopkins, Mr. Liguori, school committee member, I'm going to ask him to speak first, give him the floor first. I ask for your patience. Thank you. Mr. Liguori, you have the floor.
Thank you. My apologies, Ms. Hopkins. I just want to express my thanks to the group also. I just have a question about I believe it was tier 1 that you showed. And maybe this is the language issue that others have brought up. It says that you want to have a discrimination policy, and I don't necessarily need a response now, but would it be maybe more thoughtful to have an anti-discrimination policy, assuming that's the direction you want to go in?
Does anyone want to?
Great observation. Thank you. That's why we're having these conversations.
Okay, thank you. Thank you again, Ms. Hopkins.
I'm sorry, Ms. Hopkins and Ms. Vita. Ms. McAllister has her hand up. Ms. McAllister, you have the floor, and then I will get to, I promise to get to the public.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean
No,
to
that's
jump in
okay.
front of so
I want
many.
the school committee members to speak first. Yeah.
I too want to thank you for bringing this to our meeting tonight. It was very informative, and I think your approach is right on. Your tiered approach to tackle this, it's a huge topic. So the tiered approach to organize your work and move forward, I think is a really important step. And I think you're in the right place and you're heading in the right direction with this. So I applaud your work. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McAllister. Ms. Hopkins, you have the floor.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you. I just had a couple of questions or observations, if you will.
Sure.
There's a bit of confusion with me and maybe some of the parents. This seems like a task force that is open-ended. You just stated recently that this will be an ongoing project in our community. So this initiation of the task force at the very beginning, I guess I'm bringing a couple issues and questions. I volunteered, and a lot of people I know volunteered, and I think the total number was 129. And my concern is none of us were contacted. And I feel like the public in a way was left out of the conversation on this, and some of the parents. So I wanted to make that point, and I wanted you all to know that we are listening. I think we all have a lot more in common than not, but there's still a few things that are outstanding. Like just to volunteer, some of the questions I had to answer, I thought were really ethnically profiling people. And then I thought it was just odd that it was an anti-racist task force that would ask me those questions. So as a parent, I want you to know that's the position I'm coming from. When I volunteer for something, and that's what I see, it starts to raise a bit of suspicion. So we hear a lot of political things going on lately, and I have to say that a lot of the meetings I've heard some of those political agendas. This concerns me. It concerns a lot of parents that I know. It feels as though this political agenda, the racial equity, is coming into our school. And I think there is a much better way to handle this than, using more training, instilling something in our school system that is, can I say, unproven? I think it's, some of it is theory and it's emotional. So I'm trying to come from a parent's point of view and seeing that this group, this task force would like to change a curriculum. In our school, we have a very successful school. I think we're third rated in the state. Why would you want to, or even consider changing the curriculum of such an incredibly successful school? That is one question that I have. Another question would be, you know, is there a better way we can do this for all sides where there are no political agendas involved? And that's how I see it. And that's how a lot of parents will be seeing this, as political agendas. It's probably the easiest way to put it. And I had a lot of concerns after watching the February 3rd task force meeting. I, having been on the Special Education Advisory Committee myself, and I've had many great meetings with you, Lisa. We've had a wonderful time, but I felt there were a lot of open meetings acts that were not followed properly. So I just wanted to make a point of that we need to have this is a very sensitive type of meeting. And I think we need to be more together with the community. And it feels as though some of the issues that are political are sliding into this task force and trying to ultimately slide into our school. And I know you're going to get a lot of pushback in that arena from a lot of parents, especially when we have such a successful curriculum as it stands now. And thank you. I just wanted to make those statements. I'm sorry I couldn't figure out how to shut the camera, turn the camera on so you could see me waving my hands around. But I will take questions. I will keep putting my information in and trying to help out as much as I can, if that helps.
Okay, Ms. Hopkins, I understand you had at least one question. I heard a lot of your comments were comments. So I believe one question was on the curriculum. Does anyone from the task force want to answer that? About changing.
I'm not sure if we have the right folks to answer it today, but I believe the April 13th, correct me if I'm wrong, school committee meeting, the curriculum working group of the anti-racism task force will be providing a very similar tiered kind of overview of where their thought trajectories are so that you all can provide feedback there.
And that's a good point, Dan, because we probably should stay on the policy work group questions. Ms. Macaruso, yes.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say it's wonderful to hear your voice, Polly. You have been an outstanding leader for our special education community. And so I know I know it's not easy to speak in this space, and I am glad that you have. I have written down your notes, your feedback. I agree with Dan that the curriculum question, I think, should be answered by those that are doing like the deep dive on that. But I think some of Mrs. Chambers' recommendations actually it's going to really gel together. I'm going to look at the toolkit that she suggested. I think this is going to get more and more cooperative and feel better every time we have a meeting. Although parents weren't necessarily selected for a membership, and I do want to address that. You know, right? You are chair. you can only have so many people that have the final decision. You can invite everybody to contribute, but you have to have a core number of people to actually move the work forward. We're a 12-member school committee, and like we hang, but right, it takes a lot. So that's kind of why it had to be limited. But these conversations, these questions, absolutely should be in the meetings, and everyone's welcome to unmic and participate then. So that's really all I wanted to say is I'm taking note. I think that some of Mrs. Chambers' recommendations are going to get us closer to that, and Ms. Giusti pointed out as well. And we'll talk more about the curriculum when we get there. But thank you. Thanks for talking tonight.
Okay, so Mr. Stahl is committee member. I'll give him the floor, but we have Ms. Vita, Ms. Hill, Clifford, Mr. Hill, I'm sorry. And then Sarah has her hand up, Clark too. So Mr. Stahl, you have the floor.
So I'll have some more things to say about this later under agenda items, but I think that part of the concern is going back and watching the meetings. This committee is asking for direction from us, from a school committee. And I think that one thing we didn't do well was to set the direction as specifically as we could have or should have in the beginning. I did not vote for the formation of this task force. And the reason I didn't is because I thought the way it was formed was flawed. I thought that the makeup was flawed, and I expressed that one-on-one and publicly. If we're gonna start a group, then everyone should be represented at that group. And I don't feel like we had a diverse representation in this group. I felt like the group is very sort of lopsided. I asked for Asian representation on the group. We didn't get it. It was important to me that religious bias or religious freedoms were considered, and we didn't get it. I asked for clergy representation. We didn't get it. I made recommendations of people. They weren't called. So again, there's that feeling here for some of us that this wasn't formed well. And I don't know that as a school committee, we gave great direction. So when I read about that purpose of policies, practices, curriculum in Cheruhou, that's the goal here, through the lens of diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, I think that's very important. I think that's very important work. The reason I didn't vote, I have expressed my support for this in terms of what I think it should be from the beginning, and still support what I think it should be. But I'm not real supportive right now of the direction that it's going. I have real concerns about it. And that's because of this. Fundamentally, what I would want this task force to do is to look at Cheruhou. If we want diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, then let's figure out where we are not recognizing or understanding diversity. Let's look for where there is inequity. Let's look for where there is exclusion, and look for where there is injustice. To me, it's the first steps of a committee like this would be to assess those issues in Cheruhou, because that's what we've set out to have a committee for, to see to it that these are not happening, or where they are happening, that there's some correction of that there's some balance. So I think that's a really important work. Now, the March meeting is not posted on YouTube yet. I was not able to attend the March meeting. I've been looking for it as of the start of our meeting. It's still not posted on YouTube. So I did watch the February meeting, and I watched the previous meetings. And for me, I didn't hear much about Cheruhou in terms of the assessment of what's actually going on in Cheruhou. In fact, I didn't hear anything that was noteworthy to take notes on, as far as any specifics or any research by the committee. And if the task force is doing that, let me know, let us know, and how you're doing it, and where you're doing it, and what you're coming up with. In other words, I want to know your findings about inequity, exclusion, or injustice. And let me sum it up this way. I don't like to create problems where there aren't problems. Where there are problems, I agree they need to be addressed. And I do understand that there are problems in our country of systemic racism and other things, and everyone has bias. I completely understand that. But I think we need to be objective, and I think we need to be investigative in trying to assess where are we as a community, because we didn't ask for whatever the issues of the day are to be sort of asserted on Cheruhou. We asked for Cheruhou to be made a place that has room for diversity and that is just and equitable and all those kind of things. So when I tuned into the February meeting, some of those political things that we talked about, we had Black Lives Matter discussion, white privilege, defunding police. We had access to healthcare, inequality in healthcare, decolonization, tribal sovereignty, etc. A number of these things are talked about in the meeting. We talked about LGBTQ advocacy from pre-K on through. We talked about, there was all kinds of discussion about all kinds of things, but they were the issues of the day and discussions about the issues of the day and being sort of, how do we, and listen, I understand everyone's going to come and advocate for the issues that they're most passionate about or where they have experience. I understand that. And I don't disagree with that. But let's look at Cheruhou and assess the needs at Cheruhou so that we can address the needs at Cheruhou, not just bring a political conversation from outside and bring it in. I don't think that our public education system is the place for politically charged conversation and debate. People don't have the same positions on those issues. And those are national political debates and discussions, but I don't think that Cheruhou is the place to insert those things and try to sort of sway the children or the students one way or the other, especially not in the younger grades. I think public education needs to be a neutral space. And what I heard in that February 3rd meeting was not allowing for a neutral space, or was not allowing for a range of opinions, or for people to have difference or be on the other side of one of these political issues. And that's very problematic for me, especially when we're establishing a task force to limit discrimination. The last thing I want to say, because it's a general summary of their activities so far, that open meetings conversation, Open Meetings Act. One of the motions passed, and it's in our minutes that we'll get to later in the meeting, one of the motions passed was to discuss current events. And that's a twofold problem. It's a problem for me, one, because it speaks to this very issue that I'm talking about. Rather than assessing Cheruhou and understanding what's going on in Cheruhou, I hear the task force saying, we want to discuss whatever is going on currently in the news, socially, politically, and be able to speak to it as a task force. That's not what I'm looking for from a task force. As a committee member, I'm looking for a task force that's assessing Cheruhou and addressing issues in Cheruhou. So that speaks to me of the problem with the direction or the vision of the committee. The other issue is it's just a plain old Open Meetings Act violation to pass an open-ended motion to discuss whatever's coming up currently. If we tried to do that in this meeting and said, on our next agenda and every agenda after that, we're just going to have an issue to talk about, an agenda item to talk about whatever's going on. And as long as talking about whatever's going on is our agenda, we can vote on it. You just can't do that. Committees just can't run that way. And so with this subcommittee being part of or initiated by this committee, I'm not.
Mr. Stahl, I'm sorry. I just wanted, with the Open Meetings Act, I think that should be a kind of a different conversation, maybe with the school committee at this point. But I appreciate, your input.
Yeah, Chair, we just, it's my responsibility to help with accountability.
I know, sir. I agree. Thank you very much. There's a lot of people okay, so committee member, let's see who's, Miss Justy's first, Mr. Day, two committee members. Miss Justy, you have the floor. I'm sorry, public, I'll get to you as soon as I can.
Thank you. And just so the public knows, it's customary that the school committee speaks before the public. So
yes, thank you. Thank you, Miss Justy, for letting me know.
I will just offer that I have 3 children in the Cheruhou School District. I have 1 in the middle school and 2 at the high school. The N-word is used in our community still. Confederate flags are flown in our community still. People still use the F word in our community, and it's not the one you're thinking of. It relates to LGBTQ. These are issues that are in our community. These are issues that have to be talked about. So I appreciate if some people think that maybe those are political issues. To me, that's an inclusion and equity issue. I don't want those words said in our community. in our schools. I don't want to see that flag flown. I think we have to draw a line in the sand at some point. And if me saying I don't want to hear the N-word come out of a white child's mouth or any child's mouth at the school level is a line in the sand, I think I'm comfortable with that one. That's really not a political issue. So I appreciate the feedback, but I do think that there are lots of really prevalent issues around race and equality in our community. And I think that we need to start having those difficult conversations. You may not be having them in your home and your children may not be experiencing them. And I'm glad, but a lot of our students are. Thank you. Oh, the other point about having discussions and open-ended agenda items, you guys might want to talk about a public forum, which is what we have here. So something that any member of the public can talk about anything that they'd like at a public forum or a public portion of the meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Giusti. Mr. Day and then Mr. Luzon. Mr. Day, you have the floor.
Yes, I want to support everything that Dave said. I think that when you're talking about defunding police and other things that I understand have been going on there is not what Cheruhou envisioned when they put this task force together. These are things that, as David said, I think very eloquently in the time he spent there. We want Cheruhou to be a better place, but when we're dealing with issues that are not really germane to Cheruhou, I think is getting a little bit off the rail. And the item here is committee will provide an update. Well, I think Mr. Stoll was very correct in calling them out on a potential open meeting violation. So I don't think that he was out of order when he brought that up. And this is what it is. We're here as a school committee to critique the information that they're bringing before us. So I hope that we can keep that in mind as we continue going forward here, because we're going to be here, obviously, quite a while here with a number of people that are exercising their freedom of speech rights and speaking here. But we still have to stay focused on what this task force was designed to do in Dave's mind and in my mind. And I'm sure there's a few other people on this committee that feel the same way. So thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Mr. Day. Mr. Luzon, you have the floor.
Yeah, could we just, first of all, I'd like to acknowledge the quote here by Amanda Gorman. Being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. Can we not pretend that this is not a political discussion? It's all a political discussion. We right now are in a political discussion as a school committee. So let's not pretend that it shouldn't be about politics. All right, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Luzon. Okay, Miss Martha Vita, you had your hand raised for a while. You have the floor. Thank you for waiting.
Oh, okay.
You're good now. Thank you.
Thank you. I was taken by Dan Fitzgerald's expression that it should be viewing from the lens of the learner. And I think that what Mr. Stoll would like to insert is the word "are," that the purpose of the committee is to form and to look at the questions from the lens of our learners. And I think in doing large design projects, I would always do a simple phrase, put it on top of the wall above my drafting table and refer to it. And I think that what the process of this committee, from what I've heard, is to look at the issues, including the curriculum, from the lens of our learners. And that does require critical reading skills, which should be part of the curriculum already. How do you discern when you read an article in the newspaper? What language indicates that somebody is fabricating? How does your brain help you inform yourself? That's part of school. That's part of elementary school, or civics in 3rd grade, middle school, and upper school. And I think that if I were on this panel, I would write the phrase from the lens of our learners, and I would look at it every day before I start my task and really feel that I come to learn what the lens of our learners are. So that's what I wanted to add to this discussion. Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Vita. Let's see. Clifford Heel from Hopkinton, you had your hand raised. You have the floor. I'm sorry if I.
Hi. No, that's okay. My name is pronounced Hale.
Hale. Sorry, sir.
No, it's okay. No problem. I just want to say, first of all, racism, anti-racism, non-racism, they're not political issues. Anyone who says it's political is making excuses, because these are really human issues and how we treat other people. And when you start to say that we are, politicizing our education and driving, influencing our children, yeah, we should influence our children to be good people, good humans that care about other people and don't judge and categorize people by their race, religion, or any other aspect that might be different, that we all might have different beliefs on. So it's a little bit frustrating to hear so many people in this conversation, in my mind, actually make excuses. But, well, I'll try to let that slide, at least momentarily.
I would hope that.
One of the things that I think really first of all, I love the idea of the group, the task force. I feel like when you call it a task force, you make it sound temporary, right? It makes it sound like it's something that you're trying to fight an issue, and then when that issue is solved, the task force will go away. I really think that this should actually be a permanent committee, and something that Cheruhou School District should always have a group of people that are working to ensure that we have, that Cheruhou District as a whole has a welcoming, inclusive environment for any religion, any race, any sexual orientation, any gender. That I think is really the target here. I happen to be on the Cheruhou Middle School improvement team, and we're working on the school improvement plan. And we're revising the goals, and one of the goals was actually a safe environment. And I was so impressed to see one of the student members actually bring up the idea of making it feel secure and safe. I'm sorry, I can't remember the words off the top of my head, but it was the intention was that not just a safe environment, but an inclusive environment. And so as we're writing that goal, we're actually trying to think of, well, what's the best way to write it? We don't necessarily want to write it with a negative tone of, and anti-racism isn't negative in my mind, but what we really, we want to ensure that the Cheruhou school system is comforting, is welcoming. It doesn't matter how you identify religiously, politically, gender, sexuality. The Cheruhou school system is there to teach you, to educate you, to make you a functioning human that goes out into society. So when we start to say things like, well, let's look at our learners, and let's not create problems for Cheruhou. These are national problems, or these are political problems. That's not true, because our students do not stay in the Cheruhou district for the rest of their lives the day they graduate from Cheruhou. We need to prepare these students to go out into the world and interact with people that aren't like them, that they've not interacted with in their communities. We're a rural community. I get that. We're not necessarily exposed to a lot of the different lifestyles, different religions, and things like that. I totally understand that. but it doesn't mean that the students are going to stay in Cheruhou for the rest of their lives. And so we're not preparing them for staying in Cheruhou for the rest of our lives. So I really hope that we can look at this more holistically. Let's not look at it as a Cheruhou issue, although there certainly are issues in Cheruhou. Let's look at this as what kind of students are we hoping to send out into the world and be representatives of the Cheruhou School District, be representatives of the towns that are in the Cheruhou District, of the people, the diverse people that live in the Cheruhou District. That's what we want. I don't want people going out and being like, oh, that kid's from Cheruhou, obviously, because of whatever ideology they're spreading out that may or may not be consistent with the diverse ideologies out there in the world. That's all.
Thank you. Ms. Juicy, you have the floor.
Thank you. I wanted to point out that Iguanas is not capable of raising her hand for whatever reason, so I just wanted to bring that to your attention, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Juicy. I do have two.
Linda, just
people.
to clarify,
Sure.
everyone's functions could be different. So just to remind you, in the reactions button, there could be a raise a hand. In the more next to your name and participants, there could be a raise a hand. Phone is also *6 to raise your hand as well. Just double check, because sometimes depending on your Zoom function, even if you're a co-host, you should be able to see the raise hand in one of those functionalities.
Yeah. Ms. Spears, I'm going to call on the two public people, then have you speak. Thank you very much. Lauren Cacchiola from Richmond, you have the floor. Lauren, you're all set. Lauren, can you unmute, please? Okay, you're unmuted now. Lauren? Lauren, I'm going to go to Polly Hopkins. I'll come back to you because we can't seem to get your audio working. Ms. Hopkins, you have the floor.
Okay. Oh, good.
We can hear you now.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to go back to, I believe it was August, September, and tell you that I had emailed Dr. Callahan to ask him what the substance of this task force was about, and if it had to do with current events such as Black Lives Matter. And he said, no, absolutely not. And I have that email in the response. But I wanted to let you know that hearing the same terminology come up in the meetings is what is concerning the parents. This task force is discussing and wants to be able to discuss, and I quote, the murder of George Floyd. And they also want to discuss the insurrection at the Capitol. These are two political ideas. You have to understand that there are people on the other side of the fence. A lot of this public and a lot of this area, they don't look at either of those two subjects in the same way. So I'm not getting into that particular conversation, nor do I want to bring it up. I just wanted to let you know that I had already contacted Mr. Callahan and asked him and got a confirmation that it didn't have anything to do with it. And then as a parent, to hear that coming up again in the meetings is very it's disheartening. I wanted this to be a very collaborative effort. And like David Stahl said, we should have people from every community on this task force to put their voices in. If you want to do everything with equality and do it the right way so everybody benefits, that is the best way to do it. And, do not assume that the adults and the parents of this community haven't done research as well. We know that decolonization through the Narragansett Indian tribe is a huge supporter of the Green New Deal. And I understand why. And we understand the things that we're reading. And I just want to reiterate that there are not going to be people that are in 100% agreement with all of these movements. And it just keeps coming back to politics in our eyes. So I just wanted to make that point and let you know that the parents, we're adults, we do really good in this community. There is a lot of community members that don't see problems. And when you do see a problem, that's a teachable moment for your children. That's a teachable moment for adults as well. And if we don't have those teachable moments, then what do we have to learn? We can't come out of the box at 100%. We all have to work together. So I just wanted to make those two last points and say thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Hopkins. Just to remind everyone, we're trying to stay focused on the agenda item, which was the feedback on the policy. And I think, allowing people to speak, because I think I'm assuming that the committee wants to hear the feedback from the folks from our community, and you're all shaking your heads yes. So I kind of maybe let it go a little bit longer than it should have, but I would appreciate moving forward that we try to stick with the policy issues at hand that the task force has presented tonight. I'm sorry,
Chair.
Donna Chambers and Lisa Macaruso have their hands up. So Donna, you're first, and then Lisa.
Yeah, I'll be really quick. What I heard, I've attended the meetings. I didn't think of it as political. I don't see how I think that the things like the Capitol and what happened at the Capitol and things like George Floyd were brought up as topics quickly. There was not a long-term discussion of any of those things. I don't see the group really having political discussions. I don't know how anybody could think that you could talk about anti-racism and not refer to George Floyd. But anyway, it was an example of what was going on. I didn't see it as a political conversation at all. And at the same time, I want to remind everyone that what the groups presented tonight very clearly was an invitation for the public to come and help them get into these deep conversations. I think that's the place to go. Go to the meetings, attend the meetings, and have the discussion. It's an incredibly talented panel that can address these issues. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Chambers. I think, who was it? It was Lisa Macaruso, Mr. Day, Mr. McAllister. I'm sorry. I know Ms. Clark's had her hand up for a while, and then I'll get to you, Ms. Spears. Okay, so
And Linda, I'm
next, and then Mr. Day.
Chair, I'm happy to yield on my time to Indonis as well, but you're right. We do need to focus. I'm glad you're giving some more broad feedback. This is better placed in the meetings where we actually have all the time. The whole meeting is devoted just to this subject instead of this and consolidation of buildings, et cetera, et cetera. But I would be remiss to allow misstatements to continue. And I'm going to yield the rest of the time to Indonis to address this. But both topics that Dave Stahl has mentioned, the BLM and defunding the police that Mr. Day echoed, to be perfectly clear, and the video is available. The Anti-Racism Task Force invited the CTC to that meeting because we have an outstanding criminal justice program that the Anti-Racism Task Force is proud of. And they were invited as part of their research to understand and then recommend a way to collaborate to dispel the Black Lives Matter, defund the police anti-story and bring it together through our criminal justice program. It actually is this amazing moment where Lieutenant and Jerry Oth, it was working, it was happening. So those terms were said. Saying terms does not mean that you are endorsing terms. To be very clear, that was under the umbrella, including the health equity, because then we were talking about the health curriculum. It was part of the curriculum's work. I yield my time to Adonis.
Ms. Spears?
Thank you. I also would like to advocate for everyone here to view the meetings. We've talked more about George Floyd and defund the police tonight than we have in the totality of our other meetings in the anti-racism task force. So I urge you to please not be kind of guided by some of the fear that surrounds words like Black and lives. And certain names. And I will advocate for and continue to advocate for the immediate application of understanding the landscape of Indigenous people where we live in the United States, and being in the county that has the capital seat of the only federally acknowledged tribe in Rhode Island that has a state-to-state relationship with the United States is immediately important in terms of civics and understanding that we will kind of get into in curriculum. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's see, Mr. Day, Ms. McAllister, and then then Sarah. Sarah had her, is she still here? There she is, Sarah Clark. Okay. Okay, Mr. Day, and then Mr. McAllister and Ms. McAllister.
Madam Chairman, the agenda item said to provide an update. This has turned into a debate.
Yes, sir. I agree with you, sir.
And I would hope that you would cut anybody off that wants to debate these things in the future, because we do have a long agenda.
Yes, sir.
I'm sure other people want to talk about our budget and the new and fewer and stuff like that. So I would hope that we would not be debating anymore about whether they're doing right or wrong. They presented a good, honest approach of what they're trying to do, and we've just been debating whether who's right and who's wrong here for the last half an hour or so. So I would hope that
Thank you, sir. I really appreciate that. I've been trying to very kindly do that. So
order is the simplest way to stop it.
Thank you. I have, let's see, okay, so we have, I guess the last person to speak on this matter is Ms. Clark, Sarah Clark, and that's it. We need to move on. Thank you very much. Because she's had her hand up for about 30 minutes. Ms. Clark, you have the floor.
Thank you. And I know that you want to move on from this. I just had 2 quick points. Ms. Hopkins had stated earlier that all sides.
Oh, you're muted. Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead. It's good now.
That all sides need to be acknowledged. My only real question to her is, what is the other side of anti-racism that needs to be acknowledged? And I would like her to please stop saying all the parents or the parents don't agree with this. The parents, just speak for yourself, because I'm a parent and I am full on board with this committee. The task force is doing a great job. Mr. Stahl seems to feel it's not representative of all people. Personally, my religion is not represented. My ethnicity is not represented, and I feel completely represented by this task force. They have the best interests of all religions, all orientations, all ethnicities. I feel, this is my opinion, I feel completely represented. And also, my last thing is, when you say it's not germane to Cheruhou, so it shouldn't be discussed, all I hear is it's not white enough, move on. Current events are so important to discuss, and teachers can be trained and should be trained to just present facts. They're not saying their opinions. The children can make up their own opinions. They can go home and discuss with their parents. They can run around and feel what they want to feel, but they can be presented the facts of current events so that they can thrive in a community. And as Mr. Hale said beautifully, they're not going to stay here their whole lives. Even when my son's off to college in a couple years, he needs to be able to handle himself in a more diverse community.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. I think, Joe, do you want to kind of end this for us tonight and just kind of wrap, and then we can move on, please, sir?
I'm going to keep it real simplistic, and I'm going to share a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. And that quote is very simple, and it does apply to each of us here in our day-to-day lives and each to our students. That quote is, "An individual has not started living until he can rise above the narrow confines of his individualistic concerns to the broader concerns of all humanity." And I just like to let everybody know that is what this anti-racism task force is attempting to do, is to provide a foundation with input. Everybody's invited. Our meetings are open, they're posted. And I invite everybody to join us in the conversation. Thank you for listening to us tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Reddish. Okay. Thank you all for the conversation and the input. I really appreciate it all. And I appreciate Mr. Day's comments too. We're on to letter B, which is the Rhode Island State Assessment Program, and Miss Daly, Jane Daly, will present information on the RICAS. And so I give her the floor to do her presentation. Thank you, Miss Daly.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to share my screen. So this evening, I'm just going to give you an update on the Rhode Island State Assessment Program and essentially state testing for this school year. There are quite a few different assessments that make up the state testing program, and here's all the acronyms. So RICAS, the Rhode Island Comprehensive Assessment System, that's in English and math, grades 3. And then our 10th graders take the PSAT 10. Our 11th graders take the SAT School Day. Also, students in 8th and 11th grade take something called RINGSA, which is the Rhode Island Next Generation Science Assessment. Our students who are differently abled will take the Dynamic Learning and Science in grades 3 through 8 and grade 11. For our ELL students, our English language learners, they take Access in grades 1 through 12. Finish that up. So, participate testing, the national assessment. There's a lot more assessments. There's a link here. And get that information on the RIDE website. Whoops. Okay, let me just go back.
Jen, you were cutting out a little bit.
Yeah, that's why I took myself off the camera before. I know sometimes with a lot of folks on the camera, it can happen, but.
That's what I understand. Thank you.
Hopefully. Sorry, let me try again. I love technical difficulties. All right. So NAEP, I just mentioned that, but this year the NAEP testing has actually been postponed. So that's going to take place next year. In terms of the state assessments, what's important about them is how they inform the Cheruhou's comprehensive assessment system. And how we use the information is to help us to measure the effectiveness of our curriculum and our programs. It also helps to identify students might have extra support, and that's what individual teachers, how they use the data. It also provides information for the parents and the students about their own progress. And we do have academic requirements for graduation and some of the participation in a qualifying score on some of the reading and math standardized assessments count towards the graduation requirement. Now, this year, the Rhode Island, and actually it's always been, but never been an issue before, the Rhode Island Department of Ed is requiring that all students participate in the state testing in person and in the school building. There are no remote options for state testing this year. Cheruhou does continue to recommended guidelines and protocols set by the Rhode Island Department of Health to ensure the safety of our children, and considered that as each of the principals have developed plans to administer the test in the few months. So again, access testing already took place. One of the things the state did do this year to help with the scheduling was to extend some of the timelines for administering tests. And so that's in the red. So RICAS, ELA for students in grades 3 through 8, that window was extended through May 14th. They moved RICAS math up a little bit earlier to start April 12th. The DLMs, they extended that time period till the end of May, and they extended science to the end of June. The PSAT 10 and the SAT, those are the specific dates we're going to be administering those tests. And I'll get to that in a few minutes when I talk about the high school schedule. So again, this update is to know what's going on from the state with state testing, and then how we in the district have taken that information and developed our schedules. At the elementary school, where we have students in just 3 and 4 that are participating in the reading and the math test, it's first a small number of grade levels. And in those grade levels, we have a small number of that are distance learning. So we're going to be able to schedule those tests without any need to change the school's calendar and not add any additional learning days at the elementary schools. And each elementary school is going to send home, and I think they already have actually, letters to parents about exactly which day tests will take place. Students distance learning will be able to fill out a survey to let us know if they need transportation. They also have the option, they could be their students, but we want to make sure that we provide transportation if it's needed. And all the protocols and mitigation efforts that we've been doing since September, we will make sure, are continued as we participate in testing. So for schools, it'll be business as usual. For the middle school, it's a different story. And the reason for that is that at the middle school, we have about over 200 students that are distance learning right now. We also have at the middle school, every level, every student in the school, grades 5 through 8, who need to take RICAS for English and math, and there's multiple for each. And also the 5th and 8th half the school take the science test. So it's just a different situation because of the number of tests that have to be administered and the number of students in distance learning. So the middle school has come up with the following schedule. For the 5th and 8th graders who are currently in person, so attending in person each day, they're going to be taking the test on the days you see in front of you, March 29th, March 30th, May 3rd, and May 11th. And this is for all 5th and 8th grade students. So half the need for this, which I didn't speak to, but testing, typically you to have a lot of different testing classrooms and spaces because of the way that you need to administer the test to small groups of students. So we need to have more space than you would normally use in a school day for 5th and 8th graders to take these tests. All the students that are in 6th and 7th grade that are distance learning on a normal day, they're going to be learning asynchronously on these. Okay, it's the 6th and 7th graders. So you can see how we split up the school. They don't have the science test. So they have 2 dates in April, the 5th and the 6th, for the RICAS English, and May 15th, they're going to be taking RICAS in person, typical students that are doing every day. And those students that are distance learning in 5th and 8th grade, they're going to be learning asynchronously. And then what we're going to do is on 3 days, scheduling it so that only the distance learning students come into on these 3 days. So therefore, the rest of the students will have to be learning asynchronously. But in this way, we'll be able to accommodate the needs of these students, and also, again, make sure that we're following all the mitigation that's required. At the high school, it's simpler in that there's just less tests to give. The PSAT is for all 10th grade students. So what the high schools decide, and it's also 1 day for that test. So what the high schools decided is that on that day, they're going to have all in-person and distance learning 10th graders. So all 10th graders come in April 15th, the test. However, the rest of the students, the 9th, 11th, and 12th graders are going to have to be learning asynchronously on that 1 day. And then for the SAT, that's going to be April 13th, and that's for 11th graders. And also for 11th graders, May 4th, that's the science test. So again, all students in those grades will be coming in on those days, and the remainder of the students will be learning asynchronously. Just a reminder, it does get a little complicated, but that's why each school is sending letters to their parents so that they're aware of the upcoming changes in the schedules. And then the last school I wanted to review was Keller, our Cheruhou Alternative Learning Academy. And that because of the size of the school, even though they actually have the most grade levels tested, because they have students in K to 12, because of the size of the school, because most of the students are currently learning in person and not distance learning anyways, we will not have to change their school calendar either, just like the elementary schools, and they won't have any additional distance learning days due to state testing. So hopefully that gives you an outline or understanding of how we're going to schedule and manage state testing this year.
Thank you, Ms. Daly. I see a hand raised. Mr. Day, you have the floor.
I'm a little confused as just what we're trying to accomplish with these tests. I read that the state is not going to penalize any schools that show up with unsatisfactory results. How, with the various types of learning going on in the state of Rhode Island, how can you compare anything with anything? We can't even compare these tests with anything we did last year because the school days are not jiving. So I'd like to have Jane explain to me what we're going to accomplish with anything that's going to be coming out of these tests.
Chair,
Yes, please, Ms. Daly. He would like you to.
So if they're required, first of all, by the state, but second, why we think they're valuable and why and how we're going to use the information is that in this year, I know that there's been a lot of discussion about learning loss and students have gaps in their learning. In Cheruhou, we have our own assessments that we give to measure that as we go, but the state assessment will provide us information so that we'll know if an individual student does have gaps. And then one thing that, and I heard this earlier this evening, that people realize we do a good job with teaching our students, and that's because we use data And that's because we use assessment information to really target instruction. And if our students are having gaps, it's going to help us to do that. We catch them up.
Well, that sounds all well and good, but I don't think that's a true indication of what is happening in education here in Cheruhou. And certainly we can't compare to the rest of the state, because we're one of the few school districts in the state of Rhode Island, my understanding is, that have been going full-time in-person learning. So whatever the state comes up with, to me, is a typical state of Rhode Island comparing apples to bananas, or however you want to put it. So and I know it's state required, but like I said, I don't think you answered my question as to what we are going to get out of it as Cheruhou, and the fact that it's required by the state is just another monkey wrench into the education system here in the state of Rhode Island.
Thank you, Mr. Day. Ms. Juicy? Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Picard, did you want to say something? I'm sorry.
Do you mind, Catherine? I just want to.
No, go ahead, please. Okay.
I just want to build to your point, and I think the unfortunate thing about state assessments is the way that we do our accountability system in the nation federally, as well as the way the Department of Ed sometimes holds the accountability to the schools. To Jane's point, the use of data. So an example, we're rolling out a new curriculum resource next year for math and for ELA, and knowing specifically where our students are strong and where their areas of need are is going to be really important for information. So I'm not going to stand here and be the state assessment and we do everything right, because I think there's a lot of improvements that could be made with that system, especially as it relates to accountability. But what I can tell you is we have very thoughtful teachers. It's unfortunate about the remote access. I agree with that as well. I think the state should have had a remote access option. And I think we've advocated for that as superintendents, as assistant superintendents. So I don't agree with that either. I think, to your point, Mr. Day, it's why they have sort of backed off on the accountability. Our hope is that the access to this information will let us know how well did we do for our kids, so that we can ensure that we put the right supports in place, because they're doing the best that they can. And we know our teachers are doing the best that they can. And I know none of us wants to give up instructional time. So our principals are really mindful of that when planning that. Nothing's going to be perfect. There's always room for improvement. And we could probably debate that for a long period of time. But at any point, any option for us to get information and to use that information to do a better job for our students, and with the consultation of our teachers and administrators and parents and school improvement teams, is an important opportunity. So the unfortunate thing is the accountability system has left a bad taste in all our mouths about how the state uses that and the way it becomes a hammer, if you will. But I do think that our teachers will do a good job. You know, nobody likes the way it's happening. So I agree with you, Bill. I wish we had more say in that.
Thank you, Ms. Picard. Ms. Juicy, you have the floor, and then Mr. Liguori, and then Mr. Waterman.
Thank you. So I know it's a requirement in the state. However, I've had parents ask me if there is any provision to opt their child out. And they've stated the Every Student Succeed Act that says that a child can be opted out of that state testing. So is there a provision for that? I know that the state wants every child to take this assessment.
Ms. Juicy, you're breaking up.
But how are you prepared? Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry, everybody. How are you going to respond to those? Thanks. How are you going to respond to those parents who are saying that they have the option to opt their child out of this using the
Ms. Daly or Ms. Picard, does a student have the option to opt out?
So the interesting thing is around the state testing, typically what we look for is waivers. And I think one of the things we've talked about is medical waivers for the need. What we've been doing is the principal's been having one-on-one conversations with families who are concerned, so we can really know what's the concern. So hopefully we can address it. A lot of this is about our relationships with our families, ensuring that they understand our need, not a state need, as opposed to the work. But if parents are looking to opt out, I would ask that they reach out to their principals first, because our thinking is that there may be something we could help with.
Thank you. Ms. Liguori, you have the floor.
Thank you. I just, my question is, or comment is different than Catherine's, but your response makes me a little nervous in that it sounds like if there is an opportunity to opt out, it's highly subjective based on how the principal feels. So I don't necessarily need a comment on that, but I think as a parent, I'd be nervous. My comment goes back to Mr. Day. I generally agree with everything he said. So we have this pandemic, we're teaching an alternative format. Let's say in a best case scenario, the testing results show we did just as well as in the past. Does that mean we're prepared to continue to offer all different types of learning? So that's one thought. And I don't really even need a question now. I think these are all hypotheticals. But second, I think the impending fear across the state, if not across the world, is that the scores are going to get worse and we're going to show that this hasn't worked, right? Which I think is not really a vote of confidence to our teachers, but that's a whole nother story. But if that is the case, are we, as a school district, are we really prepared to make the kinds of adjustments necessary come fall to mitigate the losses we had? Or are we thinking this is an anomaly, a worldwide anomaly, not just a Cheruhou anomaly? And do we stick with what's made Cheruhou a good school? Why would we change based on results that are pandemic driven if we feel like we can go back to what has always worked in the past? So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Liguori. All good points. Mr. Waterman, you have the floor.
Hi, good evening. Thank you. Just out of respect of the technical issues that I've seen tonight, I'm going to shut my camera off. It's of no disrespect. It's just so that I don't break up. So I want to thank the comments of Mr. Liguori and Mr. Day. I do know from recent meetings I've had with my children's school and their teachers that there are other assessments going on, specifically the STAR assessment that's taken multiple times throughout the year that also show growth. So I do question the need for the additional state testing. I'm going to come back with a request that I've made of you or of this group a number of times. I'm going to support it with some more facts. So not counting any quarantine periods, not counting any before or after that winter break in December and January, those weeks of distance learning where it was synchronous. To date, my children have missed 7.5 days of synchronous in-person instruction due to the half days on Wednesday. My son is at the middle school. We received a notification that he's going to have 6 additional asynchronous, so not even synchronous, 6 asynchronous days for this assessment. So I'm going to take the 7.5 days that he's missed with asynchronous half days to date. I'm going to add on 6 more asynchronous days missed for state assessments. All of the dates of the assessments are not on Wednesdays. So unless this committee is waiving those half-day Wednesdays, he's going to miss another 3.5 asynchronous days. And then once testing is complete, there's another 2.5 asynchronous days. So between December and the end of the school year, these are just asynchronous days. These aren't counting the snow days. These are days when he does not see his teacher. I am at, doing quick math in my head, 19.5 days.
Mr. Waterman?
Yes.
This is Linda Lyle. Do you have a question with regards to the testing, or are you getting to that point? Is that what you're trying to make as far as the kids are missing a lot of time? Was that your?
Yes, and they're missing a lot of time as a result of this testing. So they're missing, so not only this testing, but also the half days. Now I held my comments for this and didn't put them at the beginning of the meeting.
No,
'cause
I just want to make sure you stay on topic. That's all. I
Okay,
appreciate
so with the 6 additional asynchronous days, my child is going to miss 19 and a half days of instruction with his teacher. That's asynchronous. So I'm asking you again, in light of the testing that is being pushed upon us by the state, can we please revisit those half days at the very least for the 2 months of testing? That is my ask, and I will wrap it up there. Mr. Liguri's point is well taken with regards to what will this state assessment show us and what will it do to education moving forward.
Thank you very much, Mr. Waterman, for your comments and your question. Ms. Picard, you have the floor.
Just as a clarification, on the March 23rd meeting, we do have, I have one of the business items, a review of the early release days.
Mr. Stahl, you have the floor.
Just a brief comment on that. I know Mr. Waterman's brought it up before, and I appreciate it, and I understand his points, and they're valid points. But regarding those half days, I continue to hear from teachers, and quantity of education is part of it, but quality of education is also part of it. And the teachers getting that extra time to make sure that the time they have is quality. Sometimes taking those extra few hours to regroup allows them to be much more effective in the other hours. So I appreciate the comments, and I want him to hear that I'm hearing them and I appreciate them, but I'm also seeing the other side about the quality of the prep time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stahl. Good comments. Mr. Day, you have the floor.
Oh, yes, I don't want to belabor the point, but when it was implied that parents could opt out on their students, is there any, thought of what this could do to our scores? And in the respect that some of the better testers may not choose to take these tests. I mean, I understand the state is telling us to do this, but I'm sorry. I've been involved in the school committee for a number of years, and the state of Rhode Island does not know how to run a testing program that has any impact on what we're doing here at Cheruhou. We've done a lot of things down here at Cheruhou that have fell under the guidance of the state, but we've also kind of went on our own in the past, and this is why we're where we're at. We do what the state requires, but we also step above that and do other things. So I'm very much opposed to this. I know there's nothing I can do about it, but I just want to go on record to turn around and say the state is wrong in what they want us to do, and they're never going to change my mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Day. Seeing no more hands raised. Ms. Daly, thank you very much for the presentation, time that was you took to put it together. We can move on to letter C. And I give the floor to Ms. Picard.
So this is the 2021 school committee meeting schedule. It's a revision. I recommend approval of the revised based on the second meeting in November per the request of committee members and community members, that the week of Thanksgiving is a very busy week. And sometimes if there's an agenda item that's timely or of great concern, they would prefer that we avoid weeks that could be problematic. So we revised that schedule with that feedback in mind.
So moved.
May I have a second? Yes, Ms. McAllister. So Mr. Luzon made a motion to approve the revised school committee schedule, and Ms. McAllister seconded it. Any discussion on that matter, Mr. Stahl?
Quick clarification, that's removing the meeting on November 23rd.
Correct.
I believe that's correct. Yes. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, I'm taking the vote. All in favor for accepting the revised schedule? It looks like it's unanimous, Donna. Thank you very much. Ms. Picard, item D.
So the next item on the agenda is the 2022 school committee meeting schedule. As you know, vacation schedules get submitted by all of the employees and the administrators. It's important that they understand and know when the meetings are scheduled by April 1st. So I've placed in front of you the 2022 recommended school committee meeting schedule and would look like your approval.
So moved.
May I have a second? Thank you, Ms. McAllister. Mr. Luzon made a motion to accept the 2022 school committee meeting schedule, and Ms. McAllister seconded. Any questions or discussions on this calendar? Any clarifications? No. Okay. I'm taking the vote. Those in favor of the new of the 2022 calendar? And it looks like that's unanimous also, Donna. Thank you so much. We're moving on to item E, which is the necessity for school construction update. I just want to make a comment that we are now at 8:55 and we would really like to, I know that we want to get everyone's input on this, but I was hoping that, I want to let the committee and Ryan and Ned to do the presentation, and then we'll accept questions from the public, questions, comments, or concerns. Let's see if we can try to keep them as short as possible, but I do want everyone to be heard, so we're going to do our best. I understand Ryan's going on this one. Ryan's starting us off. Okay, Mr. Callahan, Dr. Callahan, you have the floor.
Thanks, Linda. I will try to be succinct. So thank all of you for sticking around for this discussion on the necessity for school construction update. I really want to thank all of the committee members and the community members and the town council members for participating in this dialogue. A lot of really good questions have come to us recently, but throughout this process. And I really appreciate everybody's patience in this. I do want to acknowledge that this is a complex and evolving process. I realize that there are times when information is not readily available, and that can be frustrating, and it can make our community members feel like they're not part of the process, and that's definitely not what we're about. It's not something that we're trying to foster. So I really appreciate your patience as we go through this, and I think you'll see that we have more of a format going forward of the action items that need to be completed and what's about to take place. All right, so what I'd like to do tonight is walk you through some of the highlights of what we've done, how we got here, and then the next steps. And I've done this a number of times, so I'm not going to take a ton of time on that. So let's see if you can see my screen. All right. Is that visible? Okay, great. So here's the necessity of construction process. Stage one goes through this identifying the need, facilities assessment, and just getting to a point where you identify options and what path you want to take going forward. And that's really where we ended up this past February when the school committee voted to move forward with exploring one of those options. Now we're at this point where we have to take this concept, this high level concept, and move it through a stage two, develop a solution for it, right? And that then goes to, there's multiple parts to that, and I'll show you some of those parts. And then out of stage two comes an improved application. It'll go to RIDE, get approval. Once it's approved, it then moves forward into the final design reviews, and before it ends up going to the voters. All right, we went through the stage one submission process, number of parts to that, statement of interest, capital facilities update, that type of thing. The first major portion of this is to identify the brick and mortar aspect of our facilities and where those needs are. Once we got through that, it came through engagement in looking at our initial findings with respect to Cheruhou's strategic vision plan, our assessment of our infrastructure, a summary of the engineering reports related to the buildings that we have. And then coming out of that, we were able to document facility assessments and then ultimately get a summary of those facilities. The point of the summary is just to look at what in our brick and mortar infrastructure is in need, and with respect to this incentivized position that the state has put forward, where could we see the biggest benefit from a fiscal standpoint for the Cheruhou district? And you can see here where we ended up looking in terms of the newer and fewer concepts where consolidation is incentivized. We note that our 4 elementary schools are old, anywhere from 1968 to 1935. And then what you have is the existing square footage of the building, the grades that are serviced there, the number of students that are in each building, the current utilization, which is effectively how close to capacity that building is. And then it's given what's considered a facility condition index. And that basically represents the amount of repair or upkeep or capital need a building has in order to make it viable. A larger number is a worse number in that case.
Ryan, are you
And you can
changing
compare.
screens? Because we're not seeing that. Are
You
you?
can't see any?
No, right now we just have the Cheruhou Regional Schools, like the introduction screen. Sorry.
Well,
But
you
might be best
missed a fantastic presentation.
No, you're doing a great job. There you go. There it is. There you have it now.
All right, so let me try something. If I move, do you see the page turn? No?
Yes, we can see the little hand. Yes, now the page is turning.
All right, so summary of facility assessments is what you see?
Yes, sir.
All right, let me see if I can back it out of that. Okay. So with respect to the facility assessment, it gives us an assessment, well, it's redundant, assessment of the buildings and their capital needs. And then there's an engineering work that goes into put a dollar amount on those capital needs. We also did a demographic report that's available. School committee was provided with a number of options. We narrowed them down and we came up with 3, an A, B, and C option. Option A was a consolidation of the 4 elementary schools into one large school. Option B was consolidation or elimination of one of the elementary schools and expanding the other 3. And then option C is the capital plan as we would normally do it with respect to a 5-year capital plan. Now, last February, the school committee decided to move forward with exploring option A. Now, that does not solidify option A as the default position forever. It is an evolving process. It's going to take a lot of effort to fully scope out option A. And along the way, there are multiple engagement points, both with community as well as the school committee to develop the scope of that. All right, so the next steps, what are the next steps in this process? Now that the school committee has authorized it, we have, since that February meeting, Ned and Gina and the Necessity for School Committee have engaged and worked with Colliers and RGB to come up with a milestone schedule. They've met with RIDE to engage their input as well. And tonight is the first night that we are able to present that out and talk about what those next steps are, as well as talk about what needs financially we have to put in place in order to explore this option A position. All right, so I'll try and make this a little bit larger. All right, so we had already talked, if you look at, you'll see the stage, the The development project approach, that was through February and March. All right, we had a school committee meeting, basically approving to explore this, meeting with RIDE, and then obviously tonight is a process discussion. Coming out of this, the next steps are to engage an architect, and that's to issue that, and there's a number of steps in this, issue RFQ, solicitation of that, get a short list, basically negotiate that. And that's to take place through March to the end of April. Once we have that architect in place, it's to move into the conceptual design phase, which is the scoping, budget, debt capacity. There's a substantial amount of engagement, both with respect from the community as well as the school committee. There's a number of checkpoints in this process. And you can see it starts in May and effectively goes until the end of August. Now, the output from this is that by the end of August, we have a full scope of the project that can be brought to the school committee for approval. All right, and you can see it includes a number of things that have been touched on, feedback that has been provided to us from the community at large, whether it's traffic impact, environmental impact, those types of things. That's part of this developing the scope of the project. After that, it goes into a schematic design phase, package to complete a package by the end of this calendar year. After that, it goes into basically the financial portion of it, getting an estimate on the project. Now, the timing for this is important because this is to sync up with our budget cycle next year. After that, it goes into necessity approval or final approval from the committee, and then final school committee approval, both within the budget cycle, right? There will be opportunities at that point in time where we address the legislation necessary to move this forward, and then final submission to RIDE. Once RIDE approves this, George isn't here, but we'll form the school building committee, right? All of this is taking place in the 2022 year. That is, it'll be discussed in that budget context. Now, there is a lot of opportunity in this process, not just for feedback, but to either augment the scope, change the scope completely if need be, or discontinue the project if we find that we've reached an impasse in terms of a desire to continue it. So I want to turn it over to Ned as well as Gina so that Ned can talk about the capital aspect of it. I know that's something that George Ure had brought up as well as some other folks. So we want to address that at the beginning, but I just want to thank all of you and just continue to ask and engage and lean into this process. So thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Callahan. Mr. Draper, you have the floor.
Sure, thank you. As Ryan demonstrated well, you have an idea now of the timeline and the process. And I think a lot of the frustration in the community is, as we've heard back from folks, is we don't have financial answers yet. And the reason for that is that conceptual design phase is going to take us through a lot of necessary steps in the sites, what exactly the design and the education plan will look like. We have to work it out with RGB, or if we choose to select a different architect, figure out how we want the schools to function. And that in turn will create a lot of other considerations. Now, Rod, when we spoke with them earlier this week, they had a lot of concerns, as we do, about traffic patterns and how those may be impacted. I know Superintendent Picard has those same concerns, particularly if we were to mass here on the campus. So all of those things have to be fleshed out. The capital budget you have this year allows you, the school committee, to allocate the funds based on where that conceptual design takes us. And one of the things I emailed to the committee, and then we can talk about in more detail for the 23rd meeting, is the breakout of the campus and elementary. So the reason for those two tracks are there's not much that we can understand at this time, not that much that's concerning about our campus intent. I mean, there'll be some allocation issues, there'll be some prioritization questions, I'm sure that the school committee will have us adjust. But by and large, our focus on the campus is pretty straightforward. We need to go through the steps that RIDE requires to get our housing aid reimbursement to maintain that property. For the elementary, there's an iterative process that's going to take place. Again, the allocations over the course of that process will be adjusted by the committee as we learn more and take more steps. So an example of that would be if we can do what we want and we find we could do it with the property we own, then we wouldn't have a site acquisition to be concerned with. Alternatively, if we did decide to go that route, then we would have to examine that further. So that's, I hope, clarification on why we don't have beyond the FY22 timeframe more financial information to go through. We won't know those kinds of answers until we get into the conceptual design phase and then start to flesh out what does a particular solution look like in terms of cost.
Thank you, Ned. I just want to add, so basically, based on the information I received in the communication from families or community members, I'd like to clarify just a couple of things. One, there is no vote tonight on any project. Two, the March 23rd meeting was posted early because we're requesting a variance. So by state legislation, we have to post for 20 days. That vote is to allow really what I call the gift of time. It allows the committee and the community to work together to be able to determine that path forward and to clear up. Option A is our starting point. It is not the end point. So with the community feedback, the goal from now until August is to engage, to talk through our teaching and learning vision and say to our three towns, all our community members, our families, our educators, what is the vision? And then ensure that the brick and mortar matches our student vision so we can ensure our elementary schools have 21st century learning. There is, like Ryan said, an opportunity to say, well, we have an impasse and maybe not moving forward. But I believe at an earlier meeting, Ryan very articulately said that to bypass the option to access some of the RIDE dollars for a newer and fewer, knowing that we have over $23 million of needs in our elementary school, it really behooved the committee to pursue that. So I think I wanted to make sure that on the vote on March 23rd is, again, not a project vote. It is a vote to extend our time frame to get the application to RIDE for February 2022 to go to the voters to say, yes, we want this in April 2022. This April vote has nothing to do with that project, other than what Ned said, that in our newer and fewer, we have capital projects that we would have to reprioritize should the committee determine that that's the direction officially in August and moves forward, and or doesn't, that we're prepared to handle those projects. The other thing I wanted to note was that there's been some conversation about land. Ned said, we have some properties, the towns have properties that we could look at, but there's this rumor that possibly, people will spike up the cost. Just to be clear, RIDE would require an assessment of land, and then you would have to get fair market value. People just can't say you have to give me this amount of money. That's part of RIDE would never allow us to allocate that funding without fair market value. So that can't happen. And if they tried, they wouldn't allow us to access that way. So I just wanted to make sure that people recognize that. And again, just to reiterate, the option A is a starting point. And the point is the visioning of our community to really get their input to make sure that we design something that makes sense for our community, our students, and our families, and our taxpayers.
Thank you. The school committee members, anyone have any comments, questions, or Mr. Day, you have the floor.
I have a lot of questions and concerns, but I guess I just want to ask one right now. Ned said the land that we have. We don't have anywhere near enough land that we could put any kind of building on this campus and without taking away the facilities we have here for the high school and middle school kids. So I would hope that we wouldn't continue to give the impression to people in the community that we would try to stick this school on the existing campus. And this is what I heard the gentleman say, land that we already own. We don't have the land, and I hope that we never say that again, that there's any implication that we would put anything other than a small facility on this campus, because we could not do it. My understanding is we couldn't do it because the elementary school kids wouldn't have enough playground areas and stuff like that. So, you know, we're shooting ourselves in the foot if we don't clear ourselves from that area, number one, and we do have a lot of other issues that we have to sell to the taxpayers.
Thank you, Mr. Day. Mr. Luzon and then Ms. Chambers.
Yeah, I just have a couple of questions. Can we get some clarification on, I recall at the last meeting, if we went with A, I think John did say that we would have to change the Cheruhou Act, the language in relationship to where a student starts school. Is that correct or not correct?
Can someone speak to that?
Yeah, Craig, we'll have to get a, well, John's on. I'll let John speak to it if he wants to.
Yeah, John, do you want to speak to that, please? Mr. Anderson, our counsel. You're muted, John.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Thank you. You're good now. We can hear you now.
Sure. There is one provision in the Cheruhou Act that would need to be addressed. Then that is the provision that says once a child starts in a school, the child can finish in a school. To be honest with you, I'm not exactly sure how that works, given the fact that we closed a building in Ashaway several years ago, but that language is there. Fixing that language does not require opening up any other part of the Cheruhou Act at all.
Is that a school or a community school, John?
It says a school.
Okay. And my other question is in reference to, so Ryan, in the process, we voted on A. Okay, there was 3 of us that didn't. But the point is, I was on board with you folks with A. You implied when we get feedback that we realize A isn't going to materialize. So when could we take that right turn, or how is that done? How is that process? How does it work out? Can you at least enlighten us on that?
Yeah, sure. Let me try and
because that is very confusing about all this.
Yeah, I understand. So let me try and clarify that. Now, technically, we can pivot at any point in time. The option A is really a starting point. I think the high level objective of this is to ensure that if a decision to go forward with an investment in our community with a new facility of some kind, it's done at the most fiscally advantageous time to do it, right? That's our objective in this. And so within this space, right? So establishment of scope, budget, capacity, community meetings, site review, these types of things. It's through this phase. So between May and August, during that time period, we will have the scope of that project identified. And if during this process, we have reached a point where we feel that I'll give an example. If we reach a point where we feel that one large school is not tenable. It's not going to work for various reasons. Then we pivot within that time frame to explore what other options make sense with respect to the condition of our existing infrastructure and the challenges that we're going to face with that, as well as capturing or accessing these incentivized dollars. So by the end of this summer, we will have that scoped out and either pivot to a completely new type of concept and design that the community has weighed in and is more in favor of, if they decide that the option A as our starting point is not to their liking once they see kind of the rough shape of it.
So I have one more question and then just a quick opinion. How much do we have to spend to get to that point? Ballpark.
So ballpark. And Ned, if you don't mind me speaking, but if I'm wrong, please tell me. I think it is $250,000.
And how much is refundable about that if we choose not to go with the first choice?
If my understanding of the way it works is coming out of this, if we just drop it all together and just stick with a 5-year capital plan with the existing brick and mortar, my understanding, I don't know the answer to that one. There's some provision in that. I'll let Ned speak to it. But moving out of this, if the decision is to move it forward, then this should be captured in that reimbursement process.
And so my main point here is, I'm going to be honest with you folks. I have not heard, other than school committee members the night we took the vote, I have not heard anybody, and this is an honest observation, speak positive of A. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
So just, I know we have, I think we have Colliers too on the line, right, Ned?
Yes, there's a Colliers person here, Derek.
So I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I'm gonna unmute Derek. Is that okay, Chair?
Yes.
Because I think he can sort of articulate to Mr. Luzon's point, one, the risk, because if you shift from option A, that one large school, to to say with community feedback, you're gonna redesign, there's still no loss because you're still doing the same project of newer and fewer. So Derek, if you could sort of clarify that for the committee.
Yeah, that's right. So again, my name's Derek Osterman. For folks who may not know me, I'm the Director of Project Management Services for Colliers. And I'm really delighted to be working with the Cheruhou School Department in this effort as you get ready to make this great investment in your schools. So with all of that in mind, yes, it's absolutely correct that an investment will be required to take us on this journey. So long as we come out on the other side with a stage 2 submission to RIDE, the money that you are spending to put this essentially appropriation package together can be rolled into the project and is refundable. If you were to abandon it altogether, then you forego state funding and reimbursement because there is no project at the end. And so what Mr. Callahan was talking about was in looking at the numbers with Ned and projecting out what is really going to be required, it is likely that you will be spending in this initial phase approximately $250,000 to do the work necessary to put the options together, obtain community feedback, and understand really what your best course of action is and what success looks like for Cheruhou. So that's really the path forward. But I'm happy to elaborate on any of that.
I don't see any other committee. Yes, Mr. Luzon, and then, oh, Ms. Chambers, you had your hand up before, then Mr. Luzon. Ms. Chambers.
Lisa Macaruso.
Oh, sorry, Lisa, I just saw you too. Sorry.
Oh,
Go ahead, Donna.
okay.
And I'll let Lisa and then Craig, you can go. Go ahead, Donna.
Yeah,
Get everybody to have their
so
turn.
interesting. I just want to bring the public, the taxpayers' attention to this chart that Ryan just presented to us, the milestone schedule. I know that there are lots and lots of concerns. What the school committee knew from the beginning was that we could not do nothing. We had to make some capital improvements. We had to make decisions on how to best use that taxpayers' dollars to make the best capital improvements we can. And what I think I just heard Derek say is if we had to abandon option A and maybe go to option B, the second thing, that money would roll over, so it's not a waste of money. Is that correct, Derek? Okay, all right. So what I want to do is urge anyone interested, and there is a tremendous amount of community interest in this and concerns, to follow the milestone schedule. Follow us along this journey. See what the decisions are to be made, what the problems are, how we can solve the problems, help us solve the problems, and figure out the best way to do it. This is a great schedule to follow if you're interested in the concerns. And I know a lot of people overreacted and had the feeling we were putting our shovels in the ground right away. It's not, it's, as Gina said, as many people said, this is a long journey and it's going to take a while to get there. And there are adjustments that can be made along the way. So keep following this with us along the way on this project. Thank you.
Lisa Macaruso.
So this is, like everyone said, incredibly well organized and well done. And kudos to all of you for doing this on this evening with a lot going on. I want to just contribute that I had the opportunity to talk to a small sample of students at the high school. So no more than a dozen. So I do want to preface this with it as a small sample. But what was really interesting is that their feelings about consolidating to one building were focused on how they felt and how they recalled feeling as elementary school students going to the middle school and entering this, this diverse group of in terms of town-wise, coming together, and how overwhelming that was, and how that did not aid in their transition despite best efforts. And some of the conversations I was able to have, and I'll disclose with students outside of my own, was that they didn't see a student with a disability until they got to the middle school, when it was already an awkward time to try to make friends. We have students there are phenomenal students that have multiple medical issues, and our elementary school students never met them because they're housed in one building, and our CALA students are in another building. And because of the way we've distributed our special education system, right, children with disabilities are not integrated until middle school, which developmentally is again, awkward time to try to step out of bounds and make new relationships. And then of course is the issue of our minority population as well. So I thought that was really quite brilliant of them to have shared, like, there's a piece about this that's student-centered as well. So I think we should do more of that. Let's pull more students in high school where they have the ability to kind of really reflect on what that was like moving into the middle school, not only knowing your little Ashaway group, right, or only knowing your little Charlestown group. But I do want to echo that they also said that their concern was similar to what Mrs. Uri wrote about in the Westerly Sun, which is bus rides. Not a fan of a long bus ride. So the students were pretty balanced, right? They told me, like, I don't know how you're going to fix that, but we would not want to be on the bus because the bus has its own issues, and that opened up a whole different conversation about busing. But I really liked their feedback on, we need to know each other sooner so that that's not so scary for us. So I loved that. So I just wanted to put that out there as well.
Thank you, Ms. Macaruso. Mr. Luzon, Mr. Day, and then Ms. Uri, you'll be up after school committee members. Mr. Luzon, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Charlestown, many, many moons ago, attempted to pull out of Cheruhou. And one issue that really scared Charlestown, it still does, members, scares members of the town to this day, is changing the language of the Cheruhou Act in reference to where students start and go to school. That back then alluded to tax equalization. And Charlestown will have nothing to do with that. So I don't know if I should be asking at the end of the meeting for a legal opinion from John, or if John can actually answer it right now on, I'd like an answer for the question on in reference to what I originally asked. Chair, so what do I do? Do I wait for the end of the meeting, or can I do that?
Well, my recommendation to you would be to put it on as future agenda items for
Okay,
John
thank
to
you
be
very
able
much.
to prepare adequately to answer that question. That
Right.
would be my recommendation.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. And we could do that at the end of the meeting. I'm sorry, it was Mr. Day. You're next. Sorry, I'm trying to keep everybody.
Yeah, just one quick thought, and then I'll
Sure.
shut up over this. Craig and I, we've been involved in a number of building proposals over the years here. And if the administration hasn't already did so, I would suggest they go into the basement and research what went well and what went wrong, or what didn't work on the various proposals that we've tried over the number of years, because this is the only way, in my opinion. I'm not in favor of this, but it's the only way that you have a chance in hell, in plain English, of selling this. You need to get into the history of building committees here in Cheruhou and find out what you can do to change some of the attitudes of the taxpayers in this community, because it's all good and well to say, yes, I had a survey of the parents in the school, but the parents in the schools usually don't outvote the individuals in the communities here that don't have children in school. So you really need to do your research and find out what went right and what went wrong, because we've had more that didn't pass than have passed in the past here at Cheruhou. And I think Mr. Lazan will agree with me on that respect anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Day. Ms. Juicy, you have your hand up, and then Ms. Yuri be next. Ms. Juicy.
Thank you. I think this presentation has answered some questions that we had about how much money is it going to cost to get to the next phase. And I know that was a big question in many people's eyes. So thank you. I think we need to keep reiterating that this is the beginning of this process. I mean, our subcommittee has been working on this for about a year now, a little over a year, but this is really just the beginning of this process. I have heard support for the one bigger school in my community, which surprised me, but I have heard support for it. So there is support from parents and from non-parents for that model. But I think we need to remind everybody that just because it hasn't been done before doesn't mean it can't be done. You know, we never thought that a new Keller building was going to be built, and it was. I think we need to continue to be thoughtful about the process. And I think again, transparency is so critical to this process. And I think that if the public wants to have a say, they should. And there have been opportunities along the way for them to be a part of the subcommittee meetings as well. So I think we need to keep being transparent and remind folks that this is just the beginning of this process, and we are looking for many voices to weigh in about what this community wants its schools to look like. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Juicy. Georgia Yuri, you're up next. Please unmute yourself.
Hi, my name is Georgia Mueller, and I'd like to give the school committee a few more reasons why putting all our eggs in one basket in a big school is not a good idea. A factory school in the field is a bad idea because it's not a good idea to put all your eggs in one basket. If all our elementary students are put in one big school, a factory in the field, there are many unintended consequences. If something breaks at the factory, the whole elementary school goes down. If the well gets contaminated or goes dry, no one can go to school. Currently, we have water public water in Richmond and in the Hope Valley School. If there is an oil shortage, we may not be able to run the furnaces, but luckily, gas lines are already in place in the Ashaway School. Just imagine the show if the cesspools and leaching fields get overwhelmed at the factory that handles such an incredible volume of waste. Smaller facilities and individual schools operate in isolation and are less likely to have massive backup. COVID-19 has taught us lessons about the hazards of having large numbers of people close together. Whether it's the common cold, the seasonal flu, the chicken pox, or heaven forbid, another pandemic. Having our students in one place increases the likelihood of them and us getting sick. Satellite schools in different communities spreads out sources of disease and contagion, promoting more healthy neighborhoods. Our world has changed. Crazy people seem to be doing crazy things with more widespread consequences. Terrorism isn't limited to big cities and faraway places. A factory in the field is a sitting duck for target practice. It's a surefire way to create a sensational front page story with wide-ranging implications at our children's expense. Our children are our most valuable assets. We send our children to school and we entrust their care to others. By putting all of our boys and girls in one place, we are risking losing all of them. A factory in the field puts all of our eggs in one basket. We wouldn't do it with our money, and we surely shouldn't do it with our children. They're our most precious resource. I want to emphasize what I'm saying because there are more reasons than money to do or not do this project. And the people in the communities have blue ribbon schools. They're very happy with them. It's going to decimate the communities if we take the elementary schools out of our communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment.
What I would like is I would like to see the money not spent on that project A or that at all, because it's not the right project. It shouldn't be done. It's not the right thing for Cheruhou. It's not the right thing for our communities. It may be good for some places in Providence or some other places, but it's not good for down here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Let's see, Lauren, Lauren, you're up next, sorry. And then Amanda Blau and then Barbara.
Can you hear
Lauren,
me now?
Yes, I can hear you, Lauren.
Okay, great. I know I had technical issues before, so I apologize.
No, you're doing a great job.
Okay. I'm Lauren Keschel. I'm from Richmond. I'm a registered behavioral technician, so I traveled to different schools. I recently traveled to a school that was in Connecticut. It was a one-house school, so it was basically what we're talking about. My observation at first was that it was a beautiful school. It was right in, there's a middle school and a high school all connected to each other. I think we also have to look at logistics too of how this building is going to play out. At first I thought it was a great thing because all these kids were together. Building was very confusing being there for my first day. I won't get into logistics, but I think we just have to be mindful of what we're actually doing and also what we are going to be doing to our students. It's good to have a bunch of kids together learning with all different abilities. But it's also, we have to be mindful of our teachers and our staff as well. Some of these principals will probably be, unfortunately, losing their job. I really think that we do need a new school. Some has said that the schools are outdated. I think we have to look at the wholeness of this project. If option A is great, that's great, but we just have to look at all the logistics of this, not just one-sided.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you for your comments. Barbara Capalbo, you're up next. Hi, Barbara. Unmute yourself.
Just trying to unmute.
There you go.
Thank you. I've been listening and taking a look at the projects that you have in front of you. And I certainly understand the school board's position insofar as that all 4 of our elementary schools certainly do need probably far too much work. And that's all of them. And I do understand the need to have fewer and certainly 21st century, so that we wouldn't have problems like septics and water and things. We would have some redundancy there. But I do not understand why it has to be a single school. When I was considering it, and I know each of the towns cares very, very much about their home school, their community school. And this is important to each of the communities, Charleston, Richmond, and Hopkinton. I do not understand why two new schools wasn't considered, so that one is on the Richmond Charleston side and one is on the Richmond Ashaway or Hopkinton side, so that the schools can stay community based. They are 2 new schools. They would be half as much of the students. Your students are basically in half. And you have 2 new schools that can be done. Probably, for a similar cost to one huge one. And that way you keep the communities involved. You extend the amount of people, as Ms. Macaruso has said. You keep them apart so that you don't lose all your elementary students at one time. In an emergency, every parent would be there with their car, walking across the grounds if they had to, and blocking every road we have because we don't have enough road infrastructure. But I would think, and I haven't seen the other plans besides the 3 you've been discussing, is that you shouldn't dismiss the idea of 2 schools on the Charleston boundary with Richmond and the Richmond boundary with Hopkinton. And so that the communities can merge and then add into the middle and the high school. I just think I understand your problem, but a one school is all the eggs in one basket. And I think that's true. And it's too massive even for the parents, let alone the children. But I do understand your need. But it is important to remember that the community wants to feel like a community with the babies, with all the baby children. Once you have teenagers, they're starting to become quite diverse. So I would just hope that you would perhaps maybe reconsider having 2 schools on the borders of our towns, which is a very huge mileage problem for the buses. Thank you, that's all.
Thank you, Barbara. Amanda Blau, you have the floor. Amanda?
Thank you. Can you hear me, Linda?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you very much. I guess the question would best be directed to Ryan and Ned. Is there some kind of plan for a financial comparison for what, I know you don't have numbers for what the new construction would be, but if you look at even beyond a 5-year capital improvement plan, what it would take over 5 or 10 years to update if you only kept the 4 schools? Because I'm not even going to try and look backwards at what has been spent at those 4 schools, but I would be interested in seeing if maybe not you, Ryan, and you, Ned, but if somebody could project out if we don't go with option A and we don't go with option B, and we just look at the 4 schools we have and we continue to finance their improvements through capital improvements, what that ultimately costs the taxpayers.
Ryan?
Sure.
Ryan, yeah, go ahead, Ryan. Please take the floor.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. That's a great comment and question, Amanda. We have not pulled that kind of pro forma look at projected capital costs beyond what the engineering reports have told us there's direct need. I think it's possible, but it would be very speculative. I don't know, Ned, is there an industry standard for ongoing maintenance of effort for buildings of those size and age that you're aware of?
There'd probably be some things we could put together between the assessments that have already been done as well as the depreciation. So much like you would depreciate a home, you can depreciate the components on a larger building like the school. And that would give us a pretty clear idea of how much we're going to have to invest over the likely lifetime of the asset. So do I think we could come up with something? Yes, that was part of what the Jacobs report was about. I think a lot of people are a little wary of the Jacobs report and how that portrayed the cost. But to answer the question, yes, I do think we could come up with something that would say, over the next 10 to 20 years, we think the 4 schools as they are would cost X, and new construction will likely cost Y, depending on what format it's in. I don't know if Derek's seen some of that recently, if they've done some analysis like that, but I'm sure we can put something into focus.
Yeah, I would want to do some research rather than quote from from the floor this evening. But certainly we could look at the capital expenditure, and as Ned had mentioned, Jacobs and RGB had both done assessments, so we have some idea about what the immediate need is. So yes, that could be generated, but not on the spot.
It looks like you have from August till May, from May to August, so.
Thank you.
It won't take that long.
Great, then I'll be around.
Thank you. We're closing in on 10 o'clock. I don't see any more hands raised for this item E, so I'm yes to Mr. Luzon.
Madam Chair, first
Yes.
of all, a shout out to former school committee member Amanda Blau.
Oh, okay.
Second of all, I think John had his hand up.
John who?
Anderson.
Oh, I'm sorry, John, I missed you.
And last point is, I know it's 13 of, and we
Right.
still have F and all the consent agenda.
Yes.
So I make a motion to waive the policy for 10 o'clock and proceed after it.
Second.
Ryan Callahan, second that. Great. Luzon made a motion to extend the 10 o'clock end time of the school committee meeting, and Ryan Callahan seconded it. All in favor? Let's see, I think we have everyone saying yes except Mr. Day. And so, Mr. Day, are you opposing that? Yes, Mr. Day is opposing extending past 10 o'clock. I understand, Mr. Day. Thank you so much. So we will move on with the agenda as quickly as we can. Mr. Callahan, you had your hand up, but then we have a Virginia Stracuzzi who'd like to speak. Mr. Callahan, did you?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Chair. I was going to make the motion to extend the time.
Okay, thank you so
Thank you for
much.
your time,
Both of you
Virginia.
taking
Thank
good
you.
care of us. Thank you. Virginia, you have the floor.
Hi, thank you. And I'll be as brief as I can. I want to thank Barbara Capaldo for her recommendation of the 2 schools, looking into that, because that's something that's been on my mind since the last meeting. Was that ever on the table as an option? And if so, why wasn't it put forth as one of the proposals? The biggest concern I have about Plan A and its size is safety and security for those students in that building. Thinking about how many people are going to be in and out of that building, terrifies me as a parent. I think we're all terrified of some sort of malicious or violent intruder in our children's school building. It's something that we can't control from home. And I just can't imagine that whoever is letting the people in and out with the amount of staff, teachers, you have some 1,500 students, multiply everybody on their pickup list, parents, uncles, aunts, grandparents that are on their emergency pickup list. Who's recognizing those faces and letting those people into that building? That's just a huge concern for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Callahan?
Yeah, to address Mr. Tracuzzi's question with respect to 2 brand new buildings, that was not a part of the original options that we looked at. There was discussion on consolidation to 2 elementaries, but I think it used some of the existing infrastructure, and therefore it was kind of it left us still with this aged infrastructure. But Mrs. Capaldo's comment is excellent in the sense that it is something that is within scope and as part of the discussion. Our point in this is that option A is just the starting point to move forward to vet it out, and it is allowed to evolve from there. And then, with respect to your comments about security, this committee is very concerned with the safety of our children, as is everybody in our community. How people have access to buildings is going to be at the forefront of the design. It can't be, it can't move forward without a firm understanding of that, and that'll be shared with the public, and hopefully that'll assuage your concerns in that area.
Thank you, Mr. Callahan, for your comments. At this time, I don't see anyone else who would like to speak with regards to letter E. So I'm closing this discussion up. Well, it always happens. We have someone who wants to speak. Could you please identify yourself? Because all I see is a phone number. Area code 401-633-4004.
Hi, it's Sylvia Thompson. Yeah, I was hitting #6.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, that's why. But thank you for getting me in. And I appreciate everybody's patience. Some people don't have emails. They didn't know they needed to register ahead of time. But the administration's been very patient, and it's appreciated in helping people so that they could come on tonight to talk. I have 2 issues, 2 problems, 2 concerns I wanted to bring up. One of them is a document that is being used in their presentation for the options. And the second one is, the second concern has to do with the process being used to implement option A. In reference to the document, specifically the document that reads CRSD, Cheruhou Regional School District, increase in enrollment. I'm looking at that document. And the document estimates that there's going to be an increase of around 83 students over the next 5 years. And as you know, the taxpayers of Charlestown, Richmond, and Hopkinton pay their taxes based, and which is the lion's share of the Cheruhou budget. But it is the town clerks who every fall verify our enrollment in the Cheruhou school system, and they're verifying whether a student is legally a resident of the district. And the taxpayers pay Cheruhou, or pay their taxes based upon the in-district students, that enrollment. The fact is that over the last 20 years, we've lost more than 800 in-district students. This year we lost 71, so we keep losing students since 2001. In 2001, we had 3,891 students. and now we're down to 3,064. We haven't seen that low a number since the 1970s. You got to go back more than 40 years. So the numbers that are being used on this document lumps in district and out of district students. The only increase that we're seeing in Cheruhou are out of district students. So my question, well, and not a question, but I think that the way it's being portrayed, you see on the other side, you've got the projected enrollment data. And on the right-hand column, it goes back to 1996 and it lists the totals of our students. But that's including out-of-district students. So, and even those numbers are going down, those totals. But what I'd like to ask the committee to do, so that it's not misleading, to separate out in-district and out-of-district, do two totals. Let people know that there are in-district students have been declining every year since 2001. So do we want a new building for our in-district students, or are they because the out-of-district students are increasing? So I hope that you would consider looking at this enrollment and whether or not you should be portraying it as it is, or whether you should separate it out. The other item that I had was in reference to process. And in the Cheruhou Act, it's the Cheruhou Building Committee in the Act that prepares the preliminary surveys, plans, the selection of the site. And it's not the school committee or a line item in the budget that does that. It's the Cheruhou Building Committee. And the Cheruhou Building Committee is established, and this is in the Cheruhou Act, is established by the qualified votes present and by the majority vote at a legally called district meeting. And at that meeting, they're usually given a sum of money, and then they go out and they get the preliminary data that gets presented to the voters, and the voters ultimately get to decide whether to do it or not. But the Act also protects our neighborhood schools. And that was the 1986 bargain. In order to, the bargain was that if you regionalize K through 12, you can keep your neighborhood schools. So we've kept our neighborhood schools, and there's language in there that would need to be changed if we go to option A. So I don't believe the school committee has the authority to do this preliminary work. It's the building committee that has the authority. And one way to, and I know this is, you know, last week you didn't go for a vote at the district meeting. I thought for sure there would be a vote to establish a building committee so they could pursue this, but that didn't happen. And that's how it was done and has been done in the past, the 2010 campus proposal. So I want to know why aren't you, why didn't you establish a building committee and let them do this work? Or is it because you have to change the Cheruhou Act first?
Okay.
And I don't believe you can spend the money. That's my opinion. But I think if you just propose a change to the Cheruhou Act that allows for a single elementary school, you'll find out right then and there where the voters want it. And then you don't waste time and money. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson, did you want to speak?
Sure, I do want to respond. Unfortunately, Ms. Thompson does not have all her facts correct. The process that is being used here is the exact same process that was used in 2008 for the Campus 2010 process. It was the same process that was used also for CALA. The Rhode Island Department of Education has promulgated regulations that have the effect of state law and are authorized by the General Assembly, which exercises plenary power over education statewide, that establishes a building committee. The building committee has to have certain members on it. The Cheruhou Regional School District does have a building committee, but ultimately under the regulations that have been promulgated by the commissioner, by the Board of Regents, The school district has to submit the request for the variance, and the school district has to submit the stage 1 application and the stage 2 application. If Ms. Thompson is dissatisfied with those regulations, I urge her to file a petition to change those regulations with the Board of Regents. But the committee is acting in a proper manner.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Mr. Callahan, did you want to speak to that or?
No, ma'am. I have
Okay,
nothing to add to that.
thank you. Thank you. Again, I will try. I don't see, thank you all for your comments and your input. And I would like to close letter E, really close letter E finally, and move on to letter F, which is the FY22 budget. Gina?
So this is the opportunity for adjustments to be made prior to the adoption. Right now, our fund balance is at, per the committee, at 2.25%. It is at $1,216,690.67 remaining. If adjustments are made to this, I'm requesting the committee take a short recess so Ned can recalculate those figures. I also want to note that if there are no adjustments made this evening, Ned is reporting that the total amount of reductions, including additional revenue, to date is $707,745, which leaves the budget at $54,704,347, an increase of 2.23%. Impact to each town is as follows: Charlestown, an increase of 1.41%, Richmond, an increase of 2.66%, and Hopkinton, an increase of 2.33%. I'm recommending that the committee adopt the FY22 budget in the amount of $54,704,347, an overall increase of 2.23%.
So moved.
Well, I just want to wait. I want to go to, sorry. I wanted to see if anybody had any potential adjustments first on number 1. And then we can accept the adoption. Does any school committee member have any adjustments to be made to the budget at this point? And this is time to speak out if you do. I'm not.
Linda, can Craig remove his motion, please?
I removed the motion.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank
we were at number 2, so.
Yeah, we're good. Yeah, you'll be able to do, so we're at, is it okay? I mean, I needed to make sure that there was no adjustments. So I wanted to make sure everyone had a chance to speak. Okay, now we're at number 2. So the superintendent has asked us to adopt the F22 budget as the numbers as of with the budget of $54,704,347, which is an increase of 2.23%. Mr. Luzon?
So moved.
So moved. And a second on that, Ms. Chambers, second that, Donna. I guess, is there any discussion as far as this? No? Yes, Mr. Luzon, do you have a discussion or a comment?
Yes, there was emails flying around and you were going to answer some of those emails, Gina?
So we would need to place that those questions were not on the agenda, so I would have to have a time.
I just assumed they were in reference to the budget.
I actually haven't had a chance to even review all of them. I was in meetings up until 5 o'clock and then I didn't have an opportunity to do that today.
It was in reference to town councilors from the various communities. So, okay, thank you.
Mr. Luzon. I have community members that have their hands up. I think we need to close the vote on this and then if appropriate, I don't know if we need any public comment at this point, but okay, so we have a motion and a second. May I have a vote, please? I'm taking, yes, Mr. Day.
Point of order here. Discussion, when we open for discussion.
Oh, we open for discussion. Community members can discuss. Thank you. I'm just getting really punchy. I appreciate your assistance here. Barbara Capalbo, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
So there is no way for us to ask you to reduce your fund balance from 2.25% to 2% at this point? because I really think that you need to stay at your 2% on your fund balance. I don't believe over the last several years, you have needed more than that. And you have always ended up with more than that. I think it is unwise for this time and in this era. I mean, with COVID, with pandemics, with people without jobs, that this is a small way of thanking the people for supporting the schools. I would very much appreciate it if any of the school board members are willing to make that adjustment, take 0.25 off so that your fund balance remains at 2% as it has in the past. And at this point, I don't know whether you can do that. So that's a question, I think.
Thank you, I believe Mrs. Capalbo, if a school committee member wants to make a motion to decrease it to 2%, that we would take that under, we would discuss it and vote on it.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Day, do you have your hand up? Please, you have the floor.
Yes, I'm not in favor of the reduction that Barbara requested, but I will be voting against this budget because of the discussions I've had with the administration and finding money that can be removed from the RGB comic book evaluation of what needs to be fixed in our school district and the cost of it. So I do want to make that clear to everybody that if this budget was looked at in a way that RGB come up with facts and figures and dollars like that, I'd be satisfied with this budget. But I want to make that very clear that my flaw in this budget, I believe, is the capital expenditure, because they took RGB's word for too many things here.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Day. There's Mr. Luzon, you have the floor.
Yes. Barbara, in any other normal year, we would be right there with you with 2%. But I've heard everybody on this committee, and I agree with what Bill just said. 2.25. This isn't a normal year. I was watching the news today. That the scientists, they're concerned about another spike because everybody's states are eliminating the mask mandate. And I don't know. I'd rather have the comfort of knowing that in case something happens, we have the funds right there for us. So my apologies, but we can't help you I feel we can't help you this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Luzon. There's a community member, area code 401-537-8222. You have the floor. Could you give us your name, please?
Hi, my name is Joe Moreau, and I live on Old Depot Road. And I'm familiar with the access, and I've tried several times with the star 6 and the star 9. So I really wanted to speak during section E, but I just wanted to share with you a real life experience. I've lived in Hopkinton now for almost 21 years. I lived in Coventry most of my life, starting in the 8th grade. The first home my wife and I purchased was in Coventry in 1968. We built our first new home in Western Coventry in 1974. Our daughter started kindergarten in the Western Coventry school system. In 1987, we decided to have another home built, and we started looking for land in Western Coventry only. The limited search area was because we wanted our daughter to stay in the same rural school. In fact, Barry Ritchie's first school as a principal was the Western Coventry School. I spoke about that with Barry at a school committee meeting in 2018. I offered to share a video, obviously it was VHS tape.
Excuse me,
of
sir.
Barry.
Excuse me, sir. I hate to interrupt, but is this pertinent to the budget conversation that we're having at this point?
I explained initially in the beginning, I've been on since 6 p.m., that I continually hit *6 during section E, and I was never recognized. I hit *9 several times, and I was never recognized.
Well, I
So
apologize.
I don't know.
We would be out of order, and we have to stick to the agenda items, and that agenda was closed. That item was closed. I would highly recommend that, it sounds like you have a good story to tell. So maybe what you could do is email, Ms. Picard, either your concerns. I mean, because, we still have a lot of conversations with item E, and we'll be talking about this again. So I would encourage you to either come to another meeting or maybe put your requests or concerns in writing and just let us, communicate it with us that way. I really can't.
Well, in all due respect, at
Yes,
the
sir.
last meeting, was a budgeting meeting, and Ms. Ure tried to present some information and was told that it had to be at this meeting. And that's why I continued with my notes for this particular night. So obviously there is something wrong on your end of the system, because as I said, I listened to every town council meeting. I listened to every planning board meeting in Hopkinton, land trust meetings. I know how to get online to do these meetings. And after listening from 6 p.m., you're asking me to come back and submit something in writing when I believe the taxpayers should hear this. And I understand the Open Meetings Act.
Yes.
I have an item from the Attorney General's office that clearly states open meetings. I'm very familiar with for informational purposes only, even if it's not on the agenda. So I don't understand why I have to go through this again and maybe have the same situation because of the system. It's very difficult to do these meetings to begin with. I mean, I had to register today, which is fine. I understand that. And Donna was very good in taking care of this.
Right.
With the emails. And now to spend over 4 hours and I can't comment for 2 minutes? That's very unfair.
Unless Mr. Anderson, our attorney, tells me I can be allowed to do this. I really feel strongly. Yes, Mr. Anderson?
If the committee wishes to go back to the agenda item that was previously on the agenda, that's up to the committee.
Okay, committee? Does the motion have to be made? Is that what happened? I'm really trying to work this out. So
Linda, we have to take care of this motion on the floor first, and then if you want to go back and he wants to talk about that, the committee can go back.
Okay, so sir, what we're going to do is we're going to close the motion on the budget. We're going to take the vote, and then we're going to go back. The committee has decided to go back to item E to hear your comments. Would that work? Okay, I'm going to close this motion and then I'll give him an opportunity to come back. So the motion on the floor at this point is to adopt the F-22 budget as proposed or stated by Ms. Picard of the amount of $54,704,347,000. So I think Mr. Luzon made a motion. And Jonna made the second motion. Thank you. Is there any further discussion on this matter so we can take the vote? Okay, well, I'm going to close it now and take the vote. Those in favor of adopting the F-22 budget, FY22 budget, please raise your hands. Okay, so Ms. Luguri. And anyone opposed? Mr. Day? Any abstentions or recusals? Okay, Donna, we had all in favor with the exception of Mr. Day, who was opposed to the budget as proposed.
Now you take a motion to go back to business item E.
Thank you, Donna. I'm learning.
You're welcome.
Tonight. Okay, Mr. Callahan.
make a motion to return to business item E.
Thank you, Catherine, and Catherine seconded. Thank you, Mr. Stahl, too. So there was a motion to go back to item E. It was seconded by Catherine Giusti. All in favor? Aye. Okay. Well, not everyone. Anybody who's opposed, please, to go back? Mr. Day and Mr. Legori. The motion still passes. Sir, I don't see you. 401-537-8222. Would you like the floor again? We did go
Hi,
back-
thank you for your patience and your understanding. I certainly appreciate it. I ended up by saying in 1987, we decided to have another home built and we started looking for land in Western Coventry. Basically, it was to keep our daughter in the Western Coventry school system. I mentioned about Ritchie's first school as a principal. Under Barry's leadership, that school went on to win several awards. To this day, my wife and I have friends we met so many years ago when our children attended the very small school of Western Coventry. My wife continues to meet with 4 other moms from the good old days. In my opinion, that relationship would not have happened in the larger elementary schools in Coventry at that time. To this day, our daughter has friendships with people from the Western Coventry School. Today, more than ever, I believe smaller is better. Myself and many others are against this proposal. My father always told me to do what is right and not what is easy. As adults, we need to do what is right for our children. I heard several times at both of these meetings about the opportunity of the capital incentive dollars, the state funding percentages. Again, is that the right thing for our children? Please keep the current schools as they are. I want to thank you for your time, and I also want to thank you for what you do. It's much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Have a good night. Okay. Thank you, team, for helping us out and getting that done. I really appreciate it. Okay, so we're moving to consent agenda items. Does anyone have anything to be pulled? I think we need to pull the minutes because I will be abstaining from the vote.
A1 and 2.
A1 and 2. Anything else? Any other committee member want anything pulled from the agenda items?
So,
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
I make a motion to move the remainder. But before I do, I would like to recognize the 4 donations. Number 1, from the book club members Maureen O'Neill, Cindy Bailey, Jane Donnelly, Jane Glander, Shirley Griffin, Bill and Flo Griffin, Larry Graham, Patty and Bill Higgins, Marianne Libera, Penny Demasha, Donald and Janet Smith scholarship donation of $1,225 collected to honor Laurie Graham's 90th birthday. Happy birthday, Laurie, to a deserving high school student. 2, donation from the Cheruhou Youth Task Force of $450 grant to the Diversity Book Club for the purchase of anti-racism books. 3, donation from XQ plus RI grant, Principal Craig McKenzie, to the Diversity Book Club of funding to cover the cost of a guest author. And finally, number 4, donation from S. Hagberg of 2 books, stamped from the beginning, The Definitive History of Racist Ideas in America, and Cast, the origins of our discontents, to the Cheruhou High School Library.
May I have a second on that? Catherine, thank you very much. Okay, so there was a motion to approve the consent agenda items, and there was a second by Catherine Giusti. All in favor?
Chair, I had a quick question. I'm sorry. We didn't have.
I'm sorry, what did you say, David?
We didn't have a discussion moment. I just had a quick question.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if there, I thought we didn't have.
Point of order on that. The consent agenda items, they have to be pulled to be discussed. Once they're moved, the remainder of them, it's a
Yeah,
simple
that's what I
vote.
understand, Mr. Stahl.
Understood.
John?
Yes, Mr. Callahan is correct.
Mr. Callahan is correct. And I know that Mr. Callahan actually guided me on that one too. So, Mr. Stahl, I'm sorry. Okay. So so those back to the vote, those in favor of consent agenda items. Thank you. Any opposition? Mr. Day, you're opposing? Oh, you're for? Okay, for it. Okay. So the vote was unanimous for the committee members that are present.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
I make a motion to approve A1, the executive session minutes of February 9th, 2021, approval of executive session minutes of January 12th, 2021.
Oh, and Catherine second that. Thank you. There was a motion to approve the executive session minutes of February 9th, 2021, approval executive session minutes of January 12th, 2021, and second by Catherine. Okay, Brian, do we need to open for discussion? Any discussion on that matter? Thank you. None I see, so I'll take it to a vote. All those in favor of accepting the minutes? Oh, I can't, I'm abstaining. Sorry. Okay. So everyone was in favor except for Linda Lyle. She abstained because she was absent from that meeting. Okay, Mr. Luzon.
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve A2, the regular session minutes of February 9th, 2021.
May I have a second on that? Mr. Callahan, thank you. There's a motion to accept the regular session minutes of February 9th, 2021, a second by Mr. Callahan. Any discussion on that matter? I'm closing that discussion. We'll take a vote. Those in favor of the minutes? Thank you very much. Everyone's is accepting that Linda Lyle's abstaining because she was absent from that meeting. Okay, now we're on to reports. Miss Picard, your turn. You're up.
Okay, so the Anti-Racism Task Force met on March 3rd. You all saw their update this evening. They will be moving forward with additional updates by work group in the upcoming meetings. Enclosed are the approved minutes of their meeting on February 3rd. The Health and Wellness Subcommittee meeting happened today. Myself and Chair Linda Lyle were at that meeting at 4 o'clock prior to our meeting, and the minutes for the previous meeting on December 8th was also included in your packet. My update is brief around the trimester 3, quarter 4 registrations that closed today for middle school and high school and closed yesterday for elementary school. Our current count is that we have overall 25 new requests for additional in-person learners, 11 at Ashway, 1 at Charlestown, 3 at Hope Valley, and 10 at Richmond. And upon review and conversations and discussions with all elementary principals, we should be able to accommodate every request. So that's good news for elementary school. As you know, our quarter 4 registration for high school and middle school doesn't happen till April 26th. So it closed today. So we'll have a little bit more planning to do around that. But right now it looks like we have a request for 77 middle school students to return in person and 2 to move to distance learning. We actually had no request for elementary school to move to distance learning, just to clarify. Our high school has 65 in-person learning requests and 8 to move to distance learning. Out of those requests, high school students requested 27 requested transportation, and in middle school, 59 requested transportation. So our next step is to review all the requests for transportation at the middle school and high school to determine if we have the capacity to be able to add to our buses. We have heard from both RIDE and RIDO and EDOC that guidance is shifting around school bus guidance as well as spacing possibly. As we get more information, I'll let you know, but our hope is that we'll be able to accommodate all our families to do the learning scenario they wish to have without making any changes to our schedules. That's our number 1 goal. And our upcoming events are also noted as Monday, we have a state PD day, but good news as well as Friday, we have our first vaccination clinic for all our teachers. And we're starting with all our employees. Upon registration review tomorrow, we'll be able to determine if we can continue moving forward with employees such as bus drivers, coaches, student teachers, and subs. But they've asked the MedPod directors, and for us is Richmond as our lead, Joe Ostinault, who's been amazing. He will be reviewing that registration with me tomorrow. We have a meeting at 10:30. And our goal is to provide that opportunity to do that at Cheruhou Middle School starting this Friday, with the second dose being April 2nd. So very good news. On March 18th, Ashway School Family Takeout Night at Lucky House Restaurant. March 19th, secondary progress reports will be issued for the third quarter. And we are closing our elementary grading period for trimester 2 on March 19th.
Thank you, Ms. Picard. Okay, now we're on to item 10, school committee requests for future addendum items or legal opinions. Mr. Luzon.
I'd like to I'm sorry, I heard somebody else talking.
No, you're on, Mr. Luzon.
Yes, I'd like to put a request in for a legal opinion in reference to the language in the Cheruhou Act. I'd like as definitive an answer as possible on that language. Do we have to delete it for A, or we don't? I think John understands the gist of what I'm looking for.
John, do you have?
I understand.
Okay. So it's a legal opinion with regards to the Cheruhou Act with option A.
So
what you're saying. Okay.
that's basically, yeah, that's basically a motion. Do I need a second or?
Thank you. I have it. I'm writing it down. Mr. Stahl, then Ms. Chambers, and then Mr. Callahan. Mr. Stahl, yes.
Sorry, point of order, Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That legal opinion needs a vote by the committee.
Oh, we have to do
Mr.
one at a
Luzon made
time.
the
I'm
motion.
sorry. You were right. Thank you very much, Mr. Callahan. Okay, since it is a legal opinion, we do need to vote on it. May I have a motion to have John Anderson create a legal opinion with regards to the Cheruhou Act.
And that's 2/3, right?
Alistair, thank you. Ms. Chambers, second it. Those in favor?
No, it isn't. It isn't 2/3. It's just majority.
Oh, it isn't.
It's not 2/3. It's just majority.
Just majority vote of legal opinion.
Okay.
Okay. There is a discussion, right? Because we are. So do we have? So anyone have any discussion on this matter before we take the vote?
I don't think there is discussion.
There isn't discussion on this one. Okay.
Not on this.
Sorry. Okay, so all those in favor of having Mr. Anderson create this legal opinion, thank you. Those opposed, Mr. Day, are you opposing or you're up for it? You're for it? Okay, thank you. Okay, so the vote was unanimous. Thank you. Mr. Stahl, you're up.
All right, I have two agenda items.
Okay, were they legal opinion items? May I ask ahead of time?
No, they are not.
Okay, thank you.
There's two items for future agenda, both
Okay.
related to the anti-racism task force. One discussion I would like us to have is appointing an additional liaison from our committee, and also discussing guidelines and instruction for that task force.
Okay.
The second agenda item would be a discussion about dissolving the current anti-racism task force at the end of the school year and replacing it with a standing subcommittee related to anti-discrimination policies.
Okay, so I want to make sure I have this. Thank you, Mr. Stahl. So the first is to, you want to have a discussion with the school committee for future agenda items to appoint an additional school committee liaison and to look at developing some guidelines and instruction for the committee.
Correct.
And then the second agenda item is to dissolve the task force at the end of the school year, the June school year, this 2020, okay,
Correct.
end of this school year, and to replace it with a standing committee, a standing school committee, like a subcommittee.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much.
And also, since we're talking about it, I'd just like to know for sure if we have a date for the agenda for, I requested a legal opinion many months ago, which we voted unanimously to get regarding teaching Buddhism. I'd like to know a date if that's officially on the calendar.
Okay, so the date, I'm sorry, sir. So the date for the Buddhism or the date for this agenda item?
No, I've given you two agenda items.
Sure, you want to know a date when these are going to be?
My third request is I'm checking in on my status of the legal opinion.
And I'd like to be very clear that I've spoken to the chair prior to this meeting, indicating that I would be happy to respond to either of those items at the convenience of the chair.
Okay. Okay, so, but I want to clarify with David, I'm sorry, we're not talking about, you're talking, David, are you requesting, you're checking in on the legal opinions, or you want to know when these new agenda items are going to be on the, okay, please.
No, I'm not asking for a time on the new agenda items.
Okay.
I assume that those would be coming up very soon.
Sure, because it's time, yeah, it's time.
This completely separate request is I
Okay.
asked many months ago for the legal opinion on teaching Buddhist meditation practices in the curriculum.
And I believe Ms.
date.
Picard and I have put it on the agenda, the next school committee agenda.
Thank you.
It will be on the 23rd, the March 23rd. Just that discussion will take place on the 23rd.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome, Mr. Stahl. And thank you for your patience. I believe Ms. Chambers had her hand raised. Yes.
Yeah, in deference to Mr. Waterman, I would like, and it may be premature,
Sure.
but I would like if the superintendent could give us a report on the early closing days and what the teachers are doing with that time and how the kids are adapting to it. Basically, just a general report of the effectiveness and the benefit of what we're doing for that early closing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chambers. Mr. Callahan and then Mr. Day. Mr. Callahan, did you have a?
Yeah, I guess following up with what Donna had said, I believe, Gina, you have on the agenda that topic as a discussion point, right? Not just a report?
Yeah,
Yes.
March 23rd is for discussion because I'm going to ask for action or a recommendation.
Right. I thought that
Okay,
too, but I knew that too, Ryan, but I didn't know if she wanted to. Yeah, Donna, it is on the agenda. For the
That's fine. That is good for me. Thank you.
Mr. Callahan, did you have a future agenda item you wanted to put on? Thank you very much. Mr. Day, your turn.
Yes, I believe the multi-trillion package passed and it's going to be voted on, signed by the president. And one of the things in that was money that's going to be allocated to reopening schools. And my concern is that we've been operating pretty much full time since the beginning. And I would like, well, two things. One, to see how many other schools in the state of Rhode Island have operated at the same level and quality that we've operated at. And also if they have any, if the administration has any indication of whether the Cheruhou is going to be left out of this money that's supposed to be coming to the state of Rhode Island, because we've been operating in a full-time manner. So I'd like to have some information on that as soon as it's available, because I think it's very important that we don't get penalized with all this federal money coming in, because we've been doing the right thing all the time. And I know how the state of Rhode Island has worked in the past. And maybe some of you individuals on the committee have a lot more faith in the state of Rhode Island, the Department of Education, than I do. But I have a history of them penalizing Cheruhou because we didn't fit their little way of doing business. So I think we need to be very concerned and watchful on that. Thank you.
So Mr. Day, so your first question was to have some information about the number of districts that have been operating full in person like we have, similar to us, I guess, is your first thing. And then whether or not Cheruhou is going to be penalized for operating and not getting the money to reopen the schools, is what you're saying.
Well, I think it's important, because if we turn around and say we're one of 3 or
5,
4
yeah.
in the state of Rhode Island, now why are we not being able to take advantage of some of this money? Because we've been doing the right thing right along. So
Access to money. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I just want to make sure I get those correct. So that might be a point of information rather than like a discussion item, but we can talk about that. Okay. Any other? No future agenda items. Okay, Mr. Luzon,
Are we ready?
I think we are.
Ryan, you want to do it? Go ahead,
Make a
Ryan.
motion to adjourn.
Second.
Those in favor? Oh, looks like it's unanimous. I think everyone wants to adjourn tonight. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for everyone participating, and thank you so much for all your guidance and help on this.
Thank you. Good job,
Bye,
Chair.
folks.
Good, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Have a good night. Take care.